right, we're back in session. And the next section is Agenda Item 9, matters relating to the Committee on Affordability, Accountability, Planning, chaired by Javed Anwar. Javed, it's your show.
Thank you, Stuart. Is it good afternoon yet or not? Well, anyway, call it good afternoon. Okay. Item 9A is a committee chair meeting review. Thank you for joining us for matters relating to the Committee on Affordability, Accounting, and Planning. Agenda item 9B is a public testimony on items relating to the Committee on Affordability, Accounting, and Planning. We don't have any public testimony. Item 9C is a data highlight the changing pipeline to completion. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner to State Planning and Funding, and Dr. Jenna Hagee, Deputy Assistant Commissioner, will provide presentation and be available to answer any question. This item is for information only. Good afternoon, ladies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anwar. I have to say I'm feeling very confident this morning because I am the Wonder Woman who was texting back and forth with ACC this morning on the chatbot, so that was kind of fun. The presentation this morning, my first presentation, is about the 60 by 30 educated population goal, the completion goal, and how these two goals fit together. We were inspired to tackle this topic this summer after we heard a number of questions raised about whether Texas was really on track to reach the educated population goal, or whether it was even possible to reach the goal by 2030. We believe it is an ambitious goal, but with a lot of effort statewide, it is certainly possible. Let me start with a brief overview of the two goals we're going to discuss today. They are interrelated but distinct. The completion goal supports the overarching educated population goal, and I like this slide because it shows our 60 by 30 educated population goal is really the umbrella goal. It is a key piece, and the others build towards that. It is easy to see where some of the confusion may come from in terms of these goals. Many people in Texas know well the results of our 8th grade cohort analysis. In the most recent year, 22% of the 8th graders from Texas public schools went on to complete a higher education credential with an expected time frame of 11 years. If only 22% complete, one may ask, how could the current attainment levels in the state be 42.5%? Moreover, how will we ever get to 60% by 2030? Well, the reason is that the 8th grade cohort, the reason the 8th grade cohort rates are lower than the current attainment rate is that the 8th grade cohort analysis is not representative of all the many different ways Texas residents ultimately earn a credential. The 8th grade cohort analysis is a good way to examine students who come from public K-12 schools, head directly into higher education, and complete college in a relatively efficient way, basically by the time they're 24. These are completers who take a straightforward path through their education. However, there are many other paths that Texas residents take through high school and higher education. For example, there are residents who migrate to Texas either for higher education or after they earn a credential, residents who delay entry into college or stop out during the process, and there are several examples on this slide. Regardless of the paths that students follow, they will be counted towards the completion goal if they complete college in Texas, and they will be counted in the attainment goal if they live here, are 25 to 34 years old, and have a credential from anywhere. The size of the population that is not in the 8th grade cohort is surprisingly large. Here we examine all of the 2017 undergraduate completers and find that those on the pathway captured by the 8th grade cohort analysis represent just 36% of the total. Another 24% of the completers who were Texas public high school grads took more than 6 years in college, either because they progressed slowly, perhaps started as a part-time student, or due to a late start in college. 26% were Texas residents, but could not be captured in our 8th grade cohort analysis because they didn't attend public schools here or started after 8th grade. Those would be our private high school students, homeschool students, et cetera. 5% and 9% of students come to college from out of state and out of the country, respectively. Regardless of what path students follow, they will be counted towards the completion goal. If they complete college in Texas, and again, they'll be counted here if they, in the educated population goal, if they earn a credential from anywhere. Now, these are the same data for 2017 completions broken out by age groups. Most completers are 22 to 24, as you can see, but 45% of our completers are 25 or older, and we've mentioned this to you at other meetings. It was a surprise to us, but it really makes the case for why it's so important to reach out to all of our population. If you think about the 8th grade cohort, the students we track would be 24 years old or younger. So again, we have an awful lot of our students who wouldn't be captured in that cohort. The completion goal and educated population goal work together. This is a graph we developed while working on the plan. As you can see, we will rely most heavily on completions from our Texas institutions to reach our goal. If we reach our completion goal of 550,000 certificates, associates, bachelors, and masters in 2030, higher ed institutions in the state will have credentialed 2.4 million residents ages 25 to 34 in 2030. We anticipate that another approximately 250,000 educated residents in this age group will come to Texas from other places. In the most recent year, attainment increased 1.3 percentage points. Completion increased 3.9%. And actually, this is what we need each year for these measures. We expect to see some variation in these results from year to year, but we are encouraged by what we've seen early on in the plan. I also want to remind everyone that it's always been the intention of the 60 by 30 text plan to be a living plan. Long-term plans benefit from periodic review to ensure that they reflect trends and changes in the environment, such as growth changes in the population. And we will look at this at intervals. There are other characteristics of a strong plan that our strategic planning committee followed, such as having a few clear, ambitious goals with targets under each that focus attention on areas that are critical for reaching those goals. Also, our state plan allows institutions and regions to have local control about how to reach goals and targets, because this is a large state and improvements and initiatives that work in one area may not be well suited to another. So in sum, this review of the data suggests that while the 60 by 30 educated population goal is feasible, it certainly won't be easy. Business as usual won't get us there. Collaboration across higher education, business and industry, and K-12 education is critical. The state will need to retain graduates from Texas institutions of higher education, as well as attract graduates from other states to meet our higher ed goals. The strength of the Texas economy is critical. Economic development, job growth in 21st century industries, and competitive wages will be needed to attract and retain credentialed workers. We'll need to invest in and improve pathways through K-12 schools in the state to ensure many more students are college-ready and making the leap to higher ed. And we'll also need to improve the many other and varied pathways that serve our students to ensure that those pathways lead them to completion. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Cullinane Heggie now for the second part of the presentation.
Thank you. So for the second part of the presentation, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the completion goal that Julie discussed. So we have several targets under the completion goal that focus on specific subpopulations of students that are critical to meeting our overall goals: our African American students, our Hispanic students, male students, and those who are economically disadvantaged. And I'm going to focus on the last of these for this presentation. For the economically disadvantaged student target, we're looking at undergraduate students and the completion of certificates, associates, and bachelor's degrees at our public or independent institutions in Texas. We're aiming for 246,000 of these credentials in 2030. While economic status is often correlated with other demographic factors, it's important to look independently at economic status as it cuts across race, ethnicity, and gender. For example, African American and Hispanic students are disproportionately poor in Texas, and at the same time, low-income white men have some of the lowest rates of direct high school to higher education enrollment. Today's presentation will give you an update on our progress towards this particular target and dig into some of the questions we often receive about it. So first, I'd like to describe how we measure economic status for the purposes of the plan. So we track economic status by whether a student received a Pell Grant at any time prior to graduation. So to be included in the count, a student may have received Pell for many semesters or even just a single semester in their first semester that they enrolled or at any other time before they completed. We only include undergraduate completions in this target as graduate students aren't eligible for Pell Grants. In our accountability system, we show information about Pell receipt in the current year by sector. So statewide, the percent of students enrolled that are currently in the current year receiving Pell for 2016 was 33.5%, which you can see here on the graph. If we look at all the students enrolled in 2016 and check whether they'd received Pell at any time in the current year or prior, that percentage goes up to 43.6%. When we restrict our population to those who are within 2 years of completion, likely completion, we find that 52.9% of those completed Pell at some point in the current or previous years. And finally, for our academic year of 16-17 at graduation, the percent of completers who ever received Pell was 54.5%. So what you can see from this graph is that as students progress through higher education, they're more likely to have received Pell at some point the longer that they remain and progress in higher education. Now we're looking at the total number of economically disadvantaged completers since the start of the plan in 2015. So remember, these are those who received Pell at any time prior to graduation that we were just looking at in the light blue bar on the previous slide. So between 2015 and 2016, completions increased by 4.7%, and between 2016 and 2017, that increase was 3.9%. So while we're making progress towards this target, the current pace is falling behind the 5.3% we need to be getting each year to get to our 2030 target. So we're currently 22,000 completions short on this measure and only around halfway to our goal of 246,000 in 2030. This graph, which comes from our popular 60by30tx.com website, shows completions among economically disadvantaged students compared to those who are not economically disadvantaged. Many are surprised to see that the annual number of economically disadvantaged undergraduates completing a certificate or degree now exceeds the number of non-economically disadvantaged students who completed our public and independent institutions. How can this be when our graduation rates for economically disadvantaged students are lower than their more advantaged peers, and these two groups, the gaps between them, have remained stable over time? This graph attempts to address some of those questions. So here we're showing the trends in completion by economic status and sector over the last 10 years. Let me first draw your attention to the two bluish lines that represent completions at four-year institutions. The dark blue line is showing completions for economically disadvantaged undergrads, and the light blue line is showing non-economically disadvantaged students. You'll notice that in 2008, there were roughly 8,000 more completions among students who never received Pell. By 2012, those two lines cross. This is the point at which the majority of completions at four-year institutions were awarded to students who had received Pell prior to graduation. Now let's look at the two red lines, which represent completions at our two-year institutions, with economically disadvantaged students in the darker shade and the non-economically disadvantaged students in the lighter shade. You can see in 2008, the dark red line for economically disadvantaged students had the lowest number of completions, but it, by 2017, had the highest number of completions overall on the whole graph. You'll notice that 2010 was the first year economically disadvantaged undergrads made up the majority of our completions at two-year institutions, and this is 2 years earlier than the same phenomenon at our four-year institutions. Now, overall, completions by economically disadvantaged students in both sectors have doubled over the past decade and now make up the majority of our undergraduate completions. And the shift that we see on the graph is primarily due to increases in the size of the economically disadvantaged student population in Texas, as well as the growth in the two-year sector overall, where economically disadvantaged students are represented at higher rates. This presentation illustrates the importance of understanding how we define economic status in higher education and how Pell receipt is measured retrospectively at any time prior to completion. It also provides an explanation about why data show that our completions in 2017 were awarded to more economically disadvantaged students. And the key takeaways include that this shift is really being driven by increases in the size of the economically disadvantaged student population. We often talk about 60% of our K-12 students in Texas are economically disadvantaged. And we have not reached needed progress on this target in the first 2 years of the plan. Given the significant growth of this population, increased support for the group will be really critical for reaching our state goals. And one strategy to encourage support for poor students is the graduation bonus, one of our policy recommendations for the upcoming session. The grad bonus will award institutions for completions at $500 per completion, with an additional $500 for completions for at-risk students. And economic disadvantage, defined as Pell receipt or Pell eligibility, is one of the ways that a student is considered at risk for the grad bonus. So achieving our target of 246,000 economically disadvantaged completions has the potential to improve workforce opportunities for graduates across the state and improving the lives of Texans and their families. Thank you so much.
Is there any questions, please? Go ahead.
So I see, I mean, in terms of raw numbers, the numbers have increased, but are the increases due to the increased support? Is that a possible conclusion or takeaway?
I think it's fair to say that the graduation rates have improved for both economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged over the last 10 years, but the gap has remained persistent. So it's the underlying population growth that's also supporting this, but both factors are happening.
Right.
Improvements in student success and population size.
And if your question was about support in terms of Pell?
Yes.
Is that increased support? Yes. I know there have been some increases in Pell, and that's actually a very good question. We can look back and see if more students moved into that Pell category due to increases in the federal support.
Thank you.
Dr. Hagee, I've got a question for you. Could you just go over what is the successful completion? Is it four-year college? Does it include some other vocal, like somebody wants to become a welder or something like that? Is it considered successful?
So we include our certificates, so our level 1, level 2, and advanced technology certificates, associate degrees, and bachelor's degrees as well.
Okay.
And those level 1 and level 2 certificates include welding programs, HVAC, those types of things, our career and technical education programs, yes.
So these kids that go to welding and other kind of car mechanic, do they go through high school? Is it after high school, or can they go before high school and considered?
So typically it would be after high school, but we're seeing, as you heard in the presentation this morning, a fair amount of dual credit that could be on the academic side or on the technical CTE side as well. So some are completing while they're in high school, but it's not, they're typically also completing high school and coming in afterwards.
So do you count if you don't finish the high school and then go to some technical, like a welder, would you consider them be
Yeah, just to clarify, we only count in terms of completion students who complete at our Texas higher education institutions, whether they be our 2-year career schools, our 4-year universities or career schools, or our community colleges, our state technical colleges. So if someone attended a trade school that wasn't considered one of our higher education institutions that didn't award degrees, they would not be included. Or if someone did an automotive program just in high school that wasn't affiliated with a college, it wouldn't be included. But any completions in those areas at our higher education institutions are included if they're level 1 or level 2 certificates.
even if they don't finish their high school, is that correct?
As long as they are awarded that certificate or
Okay.
degree from the college, they are included.
Because I was talking to somebody, I don't know, either California or somewhere, it's a very noble cause to have everybody have education, but they were talking about some of the kids in California or maybe somewhere else, they don't force them to complete college or, high school. If they are really tend to become a mechanic, so they said, let's go ahead and let them become a mechanic. And one reason I'm just kind of worried about that our Spanish population is going to grow in next 2 decades, and I hope all these kids go to college and get, but do you take this into account that, that the population of Spanish will raise much faster than the other?
Yes, we spent a lot of time looking at population projections when working on the plan, and when I mentioned in my presentation that we're going to go back and sort of revisit our population projections, our growth projections, that's very important, and in fact, I believe we're going to be bringing a discussion to all of you about sort of where we are now in the state for some of those projections coming up at a
Have you ever studied the other state, what they do to, to encourage minorities to complete?
Yes, certainly. We spend a lot of time, and I know Jarrell's team and Rex's team spend a lot of time looking at what happens, what people are doing nationally, and looking at ideas, again, from other states, as well as sharing ideas across our institutions here in Texas.
Thank you. Any other question?
I'd just also like to mention that even many of the programs, an auto mechanic, for example, is a certificate. So just want to be cognizant that post-secondary training may take a variety of forms, but many of the vocational occupations that you talked about do still require some level of post-secondary training that would be awarded by our institutions.
Thank you. As we move on to agenda item 9D, is a presentation on the preliminary head count for fall 2018. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, will provide a brief report and will be available to answer any question. This item is for information only.
Yes, thank you very much. This is hot off the presses. Every fall, we bring to you the fall preliminary headcount enrollment, and I want to take a moment to thank our colleges and universities. They have a very quick turnaround in terms of getting these data to us, and we appreciate their efforts. So we request the preliminary headcounts from all of our institutions except for our career schools. So we include all of our public institutions as well as our independent and private non-for-profit institutions. We collect data from career schools later in the fall. The preliminary head count is a leading indicator for many higher education priorities, including completion, attainment, and funding calculations. So it's important information that we've actually gathered for decades. We receive official enrollments as of the 12th class day of the semester, which is what we refer to as the census date. But there's still a lag for our official counts, our certified counts, because of how the data collection process works and the level of detail we collect as part of that process. Our certified data will be available, or will be certified in December and available this winter, but we're pleased that the schools do report some basic head count enrollment data to us so we can present it in October. Between preliminary and certified data reporting, we used to see an enrollment drop of about 2 to 5 percentage points from the preliminary to the certified, but we've actually looked a little more closely, and in the last few years, we haven't seen as much of a drop. It's been closer to 1%, and that's really encouraging. I think the data collection is improving at our institutions, so what we see for preliminary head count tends to be closer than what our final head count looks like. At least it has been for the last several years. This year, we may see a little bit variability because we do have more and more schools that are starting to offer more 8-week courses, and we've worked with them to be able to report those 8-week courses in the fall and not wait till spring and report them as flex, which is what we traditionally had done. I'm sure many of you remember the presentation from Odessa College. They're doing lots of 8-week courses. Well, for example, Odessa's numbers in these preliminary head counts don't include their second 8-week students because they didn't have that full information when they were reporting this to us. They will be included in our final certified data. So here's what we've been waiting for. Here's the results of the preliminary collection compared to last year's certified fall enrollment. So the second column you'll see is the 2017 enrollment that had been through the full certification process, and then the 2018, again, these are our preliminary counts. And you can see that all sectors are up except for our independent colleges and universities. We actually have independent colleges and universities included in 2 categories. Our health-related institutions, we have 2 independents included there that are just health-related, as well as Baylor College of Medicine, and we have 39 independent colleges and universities included in the final column there. So you can see overall, statewide, we're up 2.57%. I think it's notable here that our public 2-year colleges are up 4%, and that's actually a high number for them compared to prior years. We also collect the data by demographic groups, and we're up for all of our major groups that we track, which is encouraging. Hispanic growth could be stronger. That's fairly low given where we're trying to be in terms of Hispanic completions, though in recent years we've seen the final certified data for Hispanic students has been a little higher than the preliminary counts, and the certified enrollment data for African American students tends to be a little lower than preliminary counts. So we'll wait and see what this data looks like when we get the final. The percent of male enrollment is down. It dropped from 45% to 44% last year, and now in our preliminary data, we're seeing 43%. And though our completions rose a little bit for male students in terms of our progress last year, we probably need to be concerned about this drop in terms of the percentage of male enrollment. Now, this slide shows what our enrollment patterns have looked like at public colleges and universities since 1990. And it really highlights the large bump we're seeing for community colleges. So if you recall the earlier slide, we're at about 756,000 students at our community colleges, which is a 29,000 jump from last year. This is actually the first time our community college enrollments have surpassed the 2011 high of 753,000. It's kind of hard to see with all those bullet points, but we are actually at the highest point we've been at community colleges, about 3,000 more than we were in 2011. So that's very encouraging to see those enrollments. This slide shows the enrollment by region, and you can see that all of the regions are up except for West Texas, and High Plains shows the largest percentage increase, followed by the Metroplex. I want to add that it is good news that the Gulf Coast is up over 3% this year. They actually saw a drop in enrollments last year because of Hurricane Harvey, and if you might recall, last year several of those areas that were affected by the hurricane were down, and some of our institutional counts actually were affected when we compare last year to this year. I believe the hurricane did affect that. So these are just a few standouts I wanted to point out from institutions. Amarillo College is projecting an almost 30% increase. I did speak on the phone with folks in the registrar's office there. They are moving to doing more 8-week courses. We have approved that they do that and report them to us, and so some of these higher numbers reflect that because they did report their 8 weeks to us at this point in time. As I said, Odessa did not. I've highlighted Lone Star. You can see they've had a very large jump, but they actually were quite a bit down in fall 2017. So they're returning to normal stages. And Houston Community College, by the way, was down about 3%. I think that's because last year they had increased enrollments because of the hurricane and students choosing, we believe, to attend there perhaps rather than Lone Star. Midland College had the largest decrease for community colleges. I think that's interesting. We do know that when we look at the economy in that region, it's really going strongly. And in terms of the data for UT Permian Basin, they were down a lot, and we contacted them, and they said that they moved one of their early college programs over to Odessa College, and they said that explains a lot of their drop. So I wanted to mention that. I included Dallas Community College and Texas A&M because they are the largest in terms of enrollments in their sectors. So you'll see that A&M University is up to almost 64,000 students, and Dallas County Community College District is up to almost 80,000 students. And finally, I included Prairie View because they had the largest percentage increase of all of our public universities this year, and I thought that was worth pointing out.
Question, is that because of Ruth Simmons?
You know, I had the same thought. We did not ask them, and I'd be happy to reach out to them regarding their increase.
Oh, yeah. No.
But I would imagine that, yes, that made a difference.
Mr. Raven, expound on that.
Oh, Ruth Simmons?
Yeah.
Well, you know, she is the new president of Prairie View A&M, and actually I had lunch with Chancellor Sharp, and he told me a very interesting and funny story about how he talked her into becoming the president of the university. I mean, he literally just approached her and said, I would love for you to be the president of Prairie View A&M, and she basically said, why would I want to do that when I she came. Well, she was at Brown, and then she went to Smith College. She was at Smith, then went to Brown. And she says, "Why would I do that when I've turned down Texas and I've turned down Stanford?" And he said he told her because Prairie View needs you, they don't. And he said over a period of time they began to talk, and he eventually talked her into taking the job on a part-time basis. And then after about 6 or 8 months, she told him that he could remove the interim, that she would keep the job. And she's from Houston, and just is the most dynamic, one of the most dynamic people you will ever meet in your entire life. I mean, it's just, I mean, what she's doing and what she's going to do for Prairie View is just going to be unbelievable.
Thank you. We're very fortunate as a state to have her. And then just a couple more slides. One of the questions we're always asked when presenting preliminary enrollments that show community college increases is how much of that increase is due to dual credit students. This is a slide that actually Rex borrowed for his presentation. I was happy to share it, so you've seen it before. But I do think it's interesting that our spring enrollments were up quite a bit. We don't collect the dual credit counts in our preliminary enrollment, but we will, of course, get that data in our regular certified data. So by January, we'll have a sense of how much of that increase that we're seeing at community colleges is from dual credit. But as you can see here, we were up about 10,000 students for dual credit in the spring, and we're seeing a 30,000 increase overall for our community colleges this fall. So I would imagine some of our increase is going to be dual credit, but there's a great amount of increase also that is our students who aren't in high school. Okay, so to summarize, our preliminary headcount enrollment shows steady growth at universities, one of the largest increases we've seen in several years at community colleges, and an increase across all major demographic groups and almost all regions of the state. Strong participation levels matter for 60 by 30 techs, so we will continue to monitor this closely. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Okay, so on the, when you calculate or estimate for the legislature in formula funding, that
Yes.
formula, the growth, is that the first year you incorporate these numbers, or has that already been estimated and delivered to the legislature?
No, that is actually part of our regular fall data collection. We do an early error-free collection where we have the institutions focus just on the semester credit hours and contact hours that need to be reported to us to plug into the formulas. So this is a separate headcount enrollment survey that we do of institutions where they just strictly send us, here's our numbers overall, what we think we're going to be seeing, as well as breakouts by gender and race ethnicity. The formula funding counts are coming in now, and we'll do a very quick turnaround to get that information to the LBB in early November.
And so you take, obviously, your actuals for this semester and then make an estimate for the second year of the biennium.
No, actually, the actuals are used for the formula funding. So we don't use estimates. Estimates are used by the formula advisory committees when they're thinking about their recommendations, but we have something called the preliminary base year that's used, which is the spring. For the coming session, it will be the data from the certified data from spring 2018, summer 2018, and then we'll include that error-free data from this fall, so from fall 2018. So we get those numbers to the LBB for their calculations in November, and then we do some final enrollments for them during the session. Those are usually due April 1st, and that will include summer 2018 certified, fall 2018 certified, and then we provide error-free for spring 2019. So it's just 1 year of data that is provided and then used to make determinations for biennial funding. And however and obviously it's up to the legislature how those numbers are used. We just provide the information to them about what the counts look like for semester credit hours and contact hours.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Quick question. You had said something about the West Texas area and the fall off in that area. Could you remind me again of what they determined the cause was? I have to believe that to a great degree that that's purely driven by the oil and gas activity in that area, and people having better options for the
Yes.
short term, the near term,
And to be
than
honest,
trying to go to school.
that was just speculation on our part when we looked at these data and saw that that was the one area that did show a drop in enrollments. We believe it's partly that, and as I mentioned earlier, we are going to get some additional enrollments from Odessa College because they're doing those second 8-week courses. I asked them to see if they could sort of estimate at this point in time, and they said they'll probably have about 400 more students come in the second 8 weeks. So that will go up a little bit, but I don't think enough to put it into the black.
Any other questions? Yes, you can see exactly when the oil price started coming back in late 2016 and early 2017 and going up to $75 in 2018, you can just see the drop in kids not going to college,
Yeah.
The UTPB can say they went all to Odessa College, but that's not the real reason, because we have an unemployment of 2% or below, so.
One thing that I do find, I was just talking to Mr. Freire from the Texas Association of Community Colleges regarding these data, and it's interesting to see such a jump at community colleges in a time when there's such a low unemployment rate, because generally, as you can see in the data for 2009, 10, 11, generally when people don't have jobs, often they'll return back to school. So it's encouraging that at a point in time for Texas where we have a lot of folks employed, that we're still seeing a lot of people going to our two-year colleges. So we were just, commenting that that's a positive thing.
Any other questions? We move on to agenda item 9E, is consideration for adopting committee's recommendation to the board relating to the 5-year review of the Higher Education Fund, HEF allocation. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, will provide a brief presentation. Dr. Eklund and Mr. Thomas Keaton, Director of Funding, will be available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. The coordinating board staff are charged by statute with reviewing the 10-year Higher Education Fund, or HEF, or sometimes known as HEF allocations, at the 5-year point. The allocations were developed in 2015, and in order to provide recommendations for reallocation, the timeline for review falls at the 3-year point so that any proposed recommendations can be prepared for consideration during the 2019 legislative session. So first, a little background. There are 2 types of funds that are constitutionally authorized for public higher education. The Permanent University Fund, or PUF, is a large endowment that is available to the Texas A&M and UT systems, with the UT System Board of Regents having responsibility for controlling those funds. The income from the PUF is referred to as the Available University Fund, or AUF. Not more than 7% of the assets may be distributed in a given year, and 2/3 are slotted for the UT system, with the rest going to A&M. Not all schools in the 2 systems are eligible, so we have provided a list of qualifying institutions on the slide. The PUF and HEF provide funding for several purposes, as outlined in the Texas Constitution, including new construction and excellence enhancement. These funds are appropriated separately in the General Appropriations Act and not directly appropriated to the institutions. Institutions may use a portion of these funds for payment of debt service on bonds issued for authorized purposes. Income from the PUF may also be used to support maintenance programs at certain institutions. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the HEF. The HEF provides $394 million per year for capital expenditures. There's a 2% set aside for technical colleges, and the rest of the funds are allocated to eligible institutions based on 3 factors. Here you will see a list of the HEF eligible institutions. Note that it does include some A&M institutions. These institutions are included due to their participation in the HEF prior to coming under the control of the A&M system. The coordinating board is required to involve institutional stakeholders in the 5-year review process for the HEF. We invited participation of all eligible institutions through a nomination process. The appointed work group met in August with additional back and forth via email. The group made recommendations, which I'll share in a moment. It's important to remember that the amount allocated remains constant at the $394 million through the end of the 10-year cycle, which is 2025. So the recommendation is strictly for allocation purposes. The work group recommended keeping the same methodology as what was used for allocation in 2015. 50% for institutional complexity, which is based on all funds formula appropriations, 25% for space deficit, which is based on unadjusted space deficit using the space model, and 25% on facilities condition, which is based on the campus condition index values for building inventories. What is different is the years of data that are input into this methodology, and so here's what's being recommended for change. This slide under current inputs shows what we're currently using for data points, and that's the middle column, and it's followed by what's being proposed for inputs for the remainder of the years through 2025. The committee recommended using the actual 2018-2019 biennial funds for the institutional complexity component and fall 2017 data inputs for the space deficit and campus condition index. So you see they have updated the years of data. On an earlier slide, it's noted that the majority of schools supported this proposal, or perhaps it's not noted in this reduced version. So I will say the majority of the schools that were involved supported the proposal, and the only real area of difference related to whether the unadjusted or adjusted inputs for the space model be used. And to put it simply, this was whether to adjust for buildings still under construction or to use only existing completed buildings in the model. The eligible institutions sent preferences to a short survey, and they were 2-for-1 for use of the unadjusted model. So that is what is in the report as the recommendation. Finally, the staff is required in the applicable statute to look at the HEF impact on deferred maintenance and facilities improvement, a common and important use for HEF funds. Staff found that increases in HEF levels corresponded to an improvement in conditions and that deferred maintenance levels are manageable. Thank you, and Mr. Keaton and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions, please? I need a second, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion 9E passes. Agenda item 9F is a report on facilities project that was submitted to the coordinating board. Dr. Julie Eklund, Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding, will be available to answer any question. This item is for information only. Any questions, please? No question. We move on to agenda item 9G and H are on the consent calendar. That concludes our portion of this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Anwar. Caught me off guard here. Let's see, next item is, next section is agenda item number 10, matters relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success, chaired by Dr. Fred Farias. Fred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome everyone to the committee relating, a report relating to the academic and workforce success. We'll begin with agenda item 10B is public testimony on items relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. At this time, we do not have anyone registered to testify. So we'll go on to the next item, which is agenda item 10C, is a report to the board on activities of the Community and Technical College Leadership Council. This is an information-only item. Mr. Ron Walker, Council Chair, will provide a brief update on the Council's activities. Welcome, Mr. Walker.
I've just completed my board itself, or the council itself. I think it's been a good year, mainly because of the efforts of many, including the fellow council members and the staff of this commission. What I'd like to do first is just to show you the makeup of our membership. Oh, is that okay? I've got it. On the left are members who are trustees. I'm from Victoria, Dan Mims from San Jacinto. You can see we have representatives from McClellan Community College, South Texas Junior College, Central Texas College, and Austin Community College. On the president's side, we have representatives from Lamar Institute of Technology, Kilgore College, Grayson College, Texas State Technical College, Houston Community College, Laredo Community College, and Howard College. We serve as a three-year rotating terms. Even though I know most of you have probably familiar with and have been shown some things concerning what community colleges are doing, I'd like to go to the second slide, which is outdated, as we just saw. This is based on the fall enrollment of 2017. You were just presented with 2018, which I think shows now the higher education total for community colleges is somewhere in the 53%. When you add in the technical college, it moves up to about the 55%. I think of interest here to everyone is the freshman and sophomore in higher education. About 75% are in community colleges. Which would you? Oh, likewise, again, this is 2017. Our enrollment kind of reflects the diversity of Texas. As you can see up there, 5% are Asian, 32 white, 12 international, 13 African American, and 44 Hispanic. Also, we have a wide variety of ages that attend community colleges and technical colleges. Another interesting, about 72% of all minority freshmen and sophomore are enrolled in community colleges. 73, right. Anyway, kind of in looking to 60 by 30, you can see that the enrollment in community colleges has been considerable since 2017. Pardon me, from 2000 to 2017, and that community colleges workforce in technical certificates and in associate degrees, we provide about 93%. The other 7% are through the two technical colleges. So that's kind of a background of some of the things we're doing out there. As to what we've actually been doing in the committee, one of the things we are doing now is having a different approach, kind of a round table. I'm going to go off script for a second, not that I had a great script to start with, but the last meeting we had was on dual credit. And I know there's talk about, specifically about rigor. The evidence that we were presented, the reports that we were presented, like those presented to you today, showed that they found the findings of sufficient rigor in dual credit. Likewise, it's my understanding that there are no studies, Texas or otherwise, which questions the rigor of dual credit. Dr. Troutman, in his study, if my reading is correct, he went to the very issue. He went to graduates of the University of Texas system and compared those who had dual credit versus those who didn't. Those who had dual credit grades were as good or better than those who did not. Those who had dual credit finished about the same time as those who did not have dual credit. Likewise, the study by Ayers, in all due respect, looked at the menu, at the study courses, but they also looked at the meal. They went and looked at the graded test, and the graded test of dual credit, it was the same rigor as if those tests had been graded in college. So we have a lot of evidence that the rigor is there for dual credit. And if I have 11 seconds, but if I may frame it, I think that it should be framed as we've got a working system out there for dual credit. Is it perfect? No. Let's not rely on rumors. Let's build a model that's going forward now, and let's improve. And we can read. We read Ayers, and we need to improve on our counseling. We're not sitting on our hands in the trenches. We're working to make those changes that are needed. So I will tell you that from my understanding, from my going around, every community college is working hard. You have citizens like me and like you, and you have the professionals. And I think if we frame it in, we've got a working system, let's make it better. That will be better for the state of Texas. Anyway, I've got a couple more things, but the red light is blinking, so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. Any of the board members have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Raven?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Walker, I just wanted to make sure that I understood you. On page 2, the top of page 2, the graph, is it your position that 73% of all freshmen and sophomores in community colleges are freshmen and sophomores or statewide?
I think that chart reflects that of the minorities who are freshmen and sophomore in any college, 72% of them are in community college, which would make 28%.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear. All right.
Right.
I understood you correctly then.
Give or take.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Stedman?
Okay, yeah, so it's fairly clear, listening to you, listening to Jacob Friday, that community colleges support the dual credit and defend its rigor, which is great. And so, as you point out, I mean, there's studies that corroborate that. But what I don't understand the enthusiasm from the community colleges as a group, when in fact, as I understand it, certain community colleges lose money if they can't charge tuition or they don't, and the formula funding is not enough to compensate them for the cost. Am I right about that? And then if so, if many community colleges are losing money on dual credit, why are they such advocates of the program?
Hate to sound corny, but we think it's a good program, and we're willing to do what we need to do to get it done. I mean, it's helping our students or our future students, and I think it's helping the state of Texas. And that's just what we do. We try to help students no matter where they are, and if they happen to be in high school who want to get ahead, we're taking a hit. And we, as Jacob and others said, we'd certainly like some financial help in doing dual credit. We're receiving some, don't mistake me. But no, I mean, we're just, and it's going to be a problem, as Dr. Miller said. There are some, Alamo, for example, can not charge. Victoria, we're in a tight situation. We're in a small community without a lot of ad valorem taxes, so we have to charge. But one of the things that the people out there are doing is our foundation and our ISD foundation got together, and we will give scholarships to those who need. So the college is getting some of that money back, but we're providing scholarships. And what Jacob said was part of his deal is, maybe getting a scholarship program where it'll benefit the students and it'll benefit the institutions.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a surprising answer, but it's great. It's your heart's in the right place.
Doing things out of the kindness of your heart probably not very popular, but I think that's what we're doing.
Okay, and thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yep, we, of course, thank you for all your service and leadership in the council as the chair. We know it takes a lot of time and effort, so we do appreciate that. And if there's no other questions, Mr. Steen?
So did I hear you correctly? You said this is your first year on the council?
Yes.
And you're the chair?
Yes.
Explain that to me. How does that work?
I hate to do it on public record, but I'm also on the board of CAT, which is Community College Association of Texas Trustees, and a fellow member is also of that organization is also on the council, and he walked up to me in the hall and said, would you like to be president? I kind of smiled, or chair, and I kind of smiled, and then he nominated me. So, and he's a retired general, and so no one gave him any flack, except me.
All right, thank you so much. That was for informational purposes only, so
Yes,
thank you for being
cut that
here.
out, that'd be great.
Okay, we're moving on next to agenda item 10D1, which is on the consent calendar. Moving on to agenda item 10D2 is a consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board relating to the request from the University of Houston for a Doctor of Medicine degree with a major in medicine. Dr. Stacy Silverman will be presenting this item for the coordinating board. We also have representatives that we'd like to welcome from the University of Houston here today. I would like to invite to the microphone Dr. Durga Agarwal, member of the University of Houston System Board of Regents. Dr. Renu Couture, welcome. Chancellor of the University of Houston System and President of the University of Houston. And Dr. Stephen Spann, Founding Dean, College of Medicine, and Vice President for Medical Affairs at the University of Houston. Also present will be Dr. Paula Merrick Short, the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at the University of Houston, will also be in the audience. So welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. And with Dr. Silverman, you can present the presentation to start with, please.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. At the September Committee on Academic Workforce and Success meeting, the committee approved the staff recommendation for approval, which also included these two recommendations. The first is that the institution will aggressively pursue funds to provide scholarships and loan repayment to achieve its goal of having 50% of its students from underrepresented populations. And the second recommendation is that the institution will provide documentation of hiring an additional 20 core faculty members through the normal process, which includes providing letters of intent and curriculum vitae and a list of courses to be taught prior to the program's first class in August of 2020. I'll summarize the staff perspectives, and I'll just highlight a few. The proposed program would likely prepare physicians who will be primary care physicians and who would likely go into geographically underserved areas of the state. Also, the institution is going to rely on a mix of funding, which will include special item funding, formula funding, as well as reallocated funds and other additional funds, including a lot of fundraising. And additionally, and maybe most importantly, certainly to me, is that they had a specific plan related to the establishment of GME positions. Notably, they have enough to fully cover their first class and actually in excess of that. This is just a reminder to the board that we are statutorily required to complete a review of the proposal, and that the staff review incorporates the criteria required in the Texas Education Code. Again, the statutory criteria really are based around need, cost, and quality criteria, which include things like, does the institution have the necessary faculty in place? Does the institution have the ability to secure the necessary faculty to ensure student success? And will the program meet academic standards? With regard to criterion number one, which is really about unnecessary duplication, the staff perspective is that the criterion is partially met. This is because Houston already has two mature medical schools, and UTMB Galveston is not far away. And additionally, Texas A&M Health Sciences Center College of Medicine also has a presence in Houston. However, the population growth of Houston and its surrounding areas, and the overall need for physicians in Texas, and the institution's commitment to primary care education is convincing. Additionally, the institution's commitment to addressing the need for more primary care physicians and improving the diversity in the physician supply is commendable. Also, the innovative approach to education, including a flipped classroom and a longitudinal experience beginning in the first year, is persuasive. With regard to criterion number two, with regard to adequate financing, the staff perspective is that the institution meets this with a mix of funding, including a legislative appropriations request for special item funding and formula funding tuition and fees set at a reasonable level similar to other Texas public medical schools, and a strong commitment to seeking financial support for its students, U of H's proposal met this criterion. With regard to criterion 3, necessary faculty and other resources to ensure student success, it's the staff's perspective that U of H's proposed program meets the criterion. With core faculty already in place, existing support faculty, and plans to hire an additional 20 core faculty, and with a long history of offering graduate programs, and an existing building to accommodate medical students for the first 2 years of the program, the institution meets this criterion. Regarding the quality criteria set in rules, the staff perspective is the proposed program meets the criteria. The highlights, we'll go through a few of those. The highlights are, of course, the design of the proposed program, the faculty resources, the external learning experiences, and again, staff perspectives is that these were met. This is another highlight. Through passage of House Concurrent Resolution 102, the 85th Texas Legislature expressed its support for prioritizing a substantial increase in funding graduate medical education before it considers authorizing new medical schools. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later today when I present the information on the GME report, but in 2017, Texas exceeded the 1.1 to 1 ratio of first-year residency positions to medical school graduates. Additionally, the coordinating board has requested $60.765 million to maintain this ratio during the next biennium. And passage of Senate Bill 1066 last session required an institution that proposes an MD or DO program to provide a specific plan to develop new residency positions for the state to accommodate the increase in the number of medical graduates. And U of H provided a specific plan detailing the establishment of 103 first-year residency positions, which fulfills this requirement. This concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to address questions.
Okay, well, I think we'll do the presentation from the University of Houston next, the system, and then we'll come back to questions and answers, if that's okay with the members. Okay, next, Dr. Renu Couture. Welcome.
Thank you. First, we appreciate the opportunity to be here with our proposal to offer MD program at the University of Houston. I know some members of my delegation have been introduced, but I wanted you to know the others who are in attendance today. We have 3 regents here. Vice Chairman of the Board of Regents, Mr. Peter Taff, is here. Our, of course, our regent, Durga Agrawal, is here at the podium. He is also the board-appointed special liaison as a voice, ears, and eyes of the board on this particular proposal. And our student regent, Andrew Teo, is here, and he's here all the way from Hawaii to study at the University of Houston. We also have our hospital partner, Dr. Nesbitt, who is the Chief Medical Officer of HCA Healthcare Gulf Coast region. Then we have, of course, Dr. Paula Shart, she's our provost. Dr. Steve Span is here. Dr. Dan O'Connors, he's here, who's the president of the Faculty Senate, as well as chairman of Health and Human Performance. And our vice chairman, Jason Smith, is here as well. Of course, everybody is prepared here to answer any questions you may have. I wanted to thank the staff and the coordinating board, as well as the members and the expert committee that you sent to review our proposal. Every single element throughout this process has made us think harder and made our proposal richer. I just want to put down the context for you, how and why we are here, and then I'm going to toss the ball over to Dr. Span to give the presentation. So there are 3 reasons why we even brought this proposal for MD here in front of you. First of all, there is definitely a tremendous shortage of primary care physicians in Texas as well as in Houston. I have been a member of Texas Medical Center for last 10 and a half years, and I have attended probably more CEO meetings than any other CEO there in that in Texas Medical Center. And I can tell you every single time the issue came up about the primary care physicians. Also, the video we released a couple of days ago has the president of Texas Medical Center talk about very passionately how much shortage there is and how important the University of Houston's medical school will be. The second reason is that this is not a badge of honor for the University of Houston. It's not something that's a patched up thing. It is a natural maturation of the offerings that we have in healthcare. As you know, we already have the ranked programs in pharmacy, optometry, we have nursing, social work, we have clinical psychology. We have, very strong programs in biology, chemistry, biomedical engineering, and so on. So we have a whole slate of programs. We have 1/4 of our undergraduates are in one of the other healthcare disciplines. This just seemed like something that we could do by building on the strength of everything else. But the third reason, which is very close to my heart, and that is that about 3.5 years ago, we decided that as a University of Houston, as a Tier 1 university, we should not have a neighborhood that is not Tier 1. And if some of you, if you are familiar with the neighborhood that we have, there are a lot of challenges. We engaged our neighborhood third ward and started discussing about the issues and what is it that University of Houston can bring to the table to really revitalize the neighborhood. How can we be helpful? And one issue kept on coming constantly. You have such a big university, and you have this, and you have that, and why can't you help us with our healthcare needs? And at that first time it was mentioned, I kind of let it go, and then it kept coming back, and everything putting together, it seemed like if we wanted to do this, we wanted to serve the need in Texas as well as the need in Houston, then there is a niche there that we can actually take on, and we can fill this particular gap. And that's how we started. I hired Dr. Span as my planning dean 3.5 years ago. And with the delegation of the faculty, existing faculty, we visited several schools throughout the nation trying to see what the best practices were. Who is doing work which is similar to what we want to do? Because my directions were absolutely clear. If you come back with a model or a training module that is same to what everybody else is doing, it's not going anywhere. So we wanted to make sure it's true to our mission, because that's what is in our DNA. We are an extremely diverse university. We have all the time, we make sure that we're providing opportunities. I mean, that's just who we are. So with all of that, we are at this point here. Now, if we have been planning for 4 years, the natural question is, well, why didn't you come earlier? Yeah, we could have come 2 years earlier. We could have come last year, but honestly, sitting here, I could not have said to you that we have really solved the issues, all the elements that go along with the medical school, particularly the residency program. I mean, this partnership came along recently, and we knew that with this partnership, now we have something that we can tell you that our plan is very fiscally sound. It's an excellent public-private partnership where it leverages a lot of private resources with some public resources, but every residency that comes to the table, the cost to the state is higher than every graduate student, who gets funded through the funding formula. So I feel very good at this point in terms of the mission that we have, the need that we can fill, the commitment that the university as a whole has, and my president of faculty senate is here to respond to that as well as that it is a program that you can say that it's a fiscally sound program in any possible way. But I'm always open for suggestions, what more we can do to make sure that we are filling the need that is there, because we absolutely do not want to build something that is a repeat of what exists already. So with that, I thank you again, and I'm going to request Dean Span to give you a shortened version of the presentation, but we are here to answer all the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Couture. It's been a real honor for me to be involved in the planning and now the implementation of this medical school. I am a primary care physician, a family physician, and I care deeply about the health of communities, particularly those with major health disparities. Just to give you the highlights, why a new medical school? Well, we all know that the value of healthcare in this country is really suboptimal. There are a lot of reasons for that, which you see listed here. One of those reasons is that we have a weak primary care system. Another reason is that we have major health disparities because of adverse social determinants of health in many communities. And Houston is really no exception to that. This well-known map shows a crescent shape of geographic communities in our city with major socioeconomic and health disparities, equal in many cases to the health indices of third world countries. And right in the middle of that crescent sits the largest tertiary care medical center in the world. Despite that, we have a long way to go in keeping our community healthy. We as a state have a shortage of physicians, particularly primary care physicians, and if today we wanted to reach the national average primary care physician to population ratio, we would need 4,600 additional primary care physicians. It's very clear that better primary care improves the value of health care. And the ethnic composition of our physician workforce does not reflect that of our population. For example, 40% of our population is Hispanic, but only about 9% of our physicians. There's not been a new medical school in Houston since 1972, while our population has essentially tripled. And we continue to have, even within Houston, significant geographic areas that are medically underserved and underserved in terms of primary care healthcare professionals. We've crafted a mission that reflects what we hope to achieve as a new medical school and is in sync with the mission of our university, a focus on providing better health and health care to our community, to our population, not only in Greater Houston, but in Texas. Educating a diverse group of physicians, many of whom would go into primary care specialties, at least 50%. Research not on diseases, but on health and health care and the ways to deliver that better. Providing care that is highly integrated, that is team-based, and collaborating with those communities with major health disparities to improve their health. We believe that in the future, our medical school will be recognized nationally and internationally for the types of physicians that we train and for the diversity of our physician graduates, as well as the impact that they make on health and health care in our community. So you might say, well, how to achieve 50% primary care graduates when the national and state average is only 20%? We found a number of best practices that can lead to that kind of desired output. A very holistic admission process, a curriculum which strongly emphasizes primary care, a culture that values primary care and encourages students to choose those specialties, and then providing scholarships and loan repayment programs that decrease graduate debt. How will this medical school be different from other existing and great medical schools in our state? The curriculum will have some unique emphases on community and population health, primary care, behavioral mental health care, and preventive medicine. It will be highly integrated. There will be a strong emphasis on interprofessional training because healthcare is not a solo sport, it is a team sport. Our educational programs will be adaptive to the needs of our learners and to the changing healthcare environment over time. We will have a longitudinal primary care experience in which every medical student will spend 1/2 day every week for the 4 weeks of medical school in a primary care setting. Our core clerkships will be innovative in that
6 months of that time will be spent in a longitudinal integrated clerkship where the student spends half a day a week with a preceptor in each of the major medical specialties for 6 months, allowing them more exposure to outpatient care and to longitudinal care of individual patients. A curriculum that emphasizes social determinants of health and social disparities. The curriculum will include 19 months of preclinical or pre-clerkship work, courses in gross anatomy and fundamentals of medical science, but most of the curriculum will be integrated medical sciences looking at specific organ systems. Throughout the 19 months, there will be a half-a-day course a week on physicians, patients, and populations, and then half a day a week for the entire curriculum in a primary care setting. In that third year of medical school, besides the longitudinal integrated clerkship, there will be 5 months in the inpatient setting in the basic medical specialties, and every medical student will spend a week in a rural health care setting. The final year will involve 2 additional inpatient rotations, and there will be plenty of medical electives, medical specialty and subspecialty electives to expose our students to the breadth of medicine. We have identified a significant number of clinical partners to help us provide clinical training opportunities to our medical students. Our major partner will be HCA Houston Healthcare, with over 18 hospitals in our region. 5 of those will be the major teaching hospitals, and besides training medical students, we will have, as you will hear, residency training programs there. We have identified a number of federally qualified health centers and safety net primary care clinics to place our students for their longitudinal primary care clerkships as well. Let me finish by saying that we have taken seriously Senate Bill 1066 in partnership with HCA. We're developing 6 new residency programs, which by the year 2022, I should say, will have 142 new first-year residency positions. By the time all of those residencies become filled throughout the years of the residencies, by 2024 to be exact, there will be a total of 389 new total residency positions in Texas. When you consider that the cost of training residents is $150,000 a year, and that we will have to pay for those residency training costs for the first 5 years of the program until the Medicare cap will kick in, this involves an investment on the part of HCA of over $250 million in graduate medical education in this state. I believe our future is bright. I believe that this new University of Houston College of Medicine can make a difference in the health and the health care of Houston, of Texas, of our country, and ultimately our world. Thank you very much.
Okay. Before we take any questions, Dr. Agrawal, I'd like to welcome you. Dr. Agrawal is a former member of this board, the Texas Higher Education Board.
It's an honor to come and see you all here. About 5 years ago, I served for 4 years on this coordinating board. Something that we did unique here at the coordinating board, we approved a DNP program. And our board members were divided. And today we have 1,000 DNPs practicing in Texas. We have 2,000 DNP students, so we'll be graduating about 1,000 DNP students per year. So these DNP students are like primary care. So we set a new path for primary care for the state of Texas when we approved that about 7 years ago. I think approving this primary care program that we are presenting here with the hardworking people like Dr. Span and Dr. Kator. They have done a wonderful job. I've known Dr. Span for more than 20 years. I came to Texas 50 years ago, and in last 46 years, there has not been any new medical school. Population of Houston was about 2 million, like Dr. Kator said. Now population is 6 million. I think it's a high time that we have a new medical school, and we have done such a good job of raising money. Dr. Kator and Dr. Span in particular, Dr. Span knows the medical community in Houston. He was right-hand man of the president of Baylor College of Medicine. He was the person who was coordinating with the Rice to get a Baylor-Rice relationship going. I think we are in good hands. We will appreciate your approval of this program. I can keep on going.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, and welcome back again to this familiar room for you. Commissioner?
One quick comment I want to make.
Yes, sir.
When I was here for 4 years on coordinating board, I never had seen 3 regents coming to make a presentation. So Dr. Kator has all of us rounded together to come
good.
here.
No, she's done a great job, so I know, keeping us all informed, so we do appreciate that, Dr. Couture, and your staff and your team. Commissioner, did you want to make a comment? Then we'll go to the board members for questions and comments, okay?
Well, I've expressed my concerns about this proposal a number of times. My concerns have absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the proposal or the arguments that President Couture and her colleagues have made so elegantly. So it's a very good proposal.
Okay, Mr. Anwar?
Dr. Couture and Dr. Span, as Dr. Span said, only 20% of the medical school medical student goes to primary care. So what incentive you're going to give them to go into primary care, and especially the rural areas of Texas? Do you have any plans regarding that, please?
So I think incentives are important. The 2 typical incentives are scholarships and loan repayment programs, and one of the challenges that primary care doctors face is that their specialty colleagues in our current reimbursement system often earn 2 to 3 times as much. That's beginning to change, by the way, with value-based reimbursement. But there have been a number of experiences around the state and around the country in which scholarshiping students or giving them loans which are basically repaid if they go to an underserved area and practice primary care have been shown to be effective. There are some federal programs along those lines. There have been state programs. I think it would be helpful to have additional state programs. We're busy at work raising scholarship funds, and to date we have raised over $4 million. The fact is that we have full tuition and fee scholarships for our entire first class of 30 students for their 4 years of medical school, and we have a second donor who has provided full scholarships for 4 years for a third of our second class for 4 years, and we hope to be able to find ways to scholarship that entire class. So we think that those are the ways to be successful. In terms of getting doctors to rural America, probably the most effective tool is to recruit students who grew up in rural America who plan to go back to practice in those areas. I hope that answers your question.
One more question.
Yes.
As far as all this funding and all this stuff has been committed, is that right, Dr. Silverman and Dr. Couture? All the scholarships and all that stuff? It has been committed.
The money, you mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's exactly that.
My question is this, you're talking about the first 4 years and then
Yes.
later on, all these people have committed
yes.
legally all this money for your institution. Is that right, Dr. Silverman?
Yes.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's definitely this committed. We don't count the money until the agreement has been signed.
That's very good. Good.
And I just want to point out, since you were just talking about Regent Agrawal just 2 weeks ago gave a major 8-figure gift to put his name on one of our buildings in the university. So he's not only passionate, but he's very generous with his wallet as well.
Dr. Agrawal, I take my hats off for doing such a wonderful job.
Thank you very much. I wanted to add something else to it. We are talking to another donor who thinks he will like to support the second entering class of 30 students. Although 1/3 has been already committed, this donor wants to make a commitment for the second entry class of 30 students for next 4 years.
That's great.
Great
That's
news.
great.
Congratulations.
Mr. Raven?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me begin by saying I want to applaud Dr. Couture and Dr. Spann. It's not only an impressive-looking proposal, but the substance of it is nothing short of outstanding. So I first want to say thank you for that. Secondly, I went to undergraduate at the University of Houston and went to law school at the University of Houston. And I know the Third Ward community as well as anybody in this room. And when we think about the medical center and its proximity to the University of Houston, we tend to think of it as being very close. But I can tell you from my own personal experience, although it may be less than 10 miles, when you lack access, it's the same if you say it's 1 million miles. And so the hope, quite frankly, that a medical school in the Third Ward will not only help the University of Houston, that goes without saying. And at one level, the University of Houston doesn't need any help. But the Third Ward needs some help, and it needs this medical school. And I think it would be a great addition to a great university, but it will serve that community at a need that that community definitely has. I can recall as an undergraduate student that I needed eyeglasses. And quite frankly, had it not been for the optometry school at the University of Houston, where I went and got care and was fitted with eyeglasses and received those eyeglasses, I'm not sure it would have been, if it would have gotten done. And that, I mean, that is just my personal experience, but I think it speaks to, when we talk about access, we you know, the medical center is the best in the world. I would agree with that. But that doesn't mean that everybody in every community has equal access. And I think that's what one of the great benefits that this school will provide. And lastly, I mean, I guess my question would be to the Chief Medical Officer at HCA, if he could just tell this board what benefit, I mean, that's a tremendous business proposition for you and the business commitment. What benefit does this provide to your business?
Sure, and Steve Nesbitt with the HCA. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. It is truly a win-win. I've told Dr. Couture before that all the stars seem to align at the same time. HCA made a commitment to start a residency program in the Gulf Coast Division, primarily in the Houston market. At about the same time, they made the decision and voted with their board to have a medical school. So it's good for us, it's good for them. We also suffer, I guess, the shortage of physicians in our recruitment efforts. So this is one win for us that we can kind of grow our own and have these docs around available for practice when they finish. And a lot of the statistics do show you that folks will stay in the place where they did their residency more than not. So that's very powerful for us. It's a stimulant to all our hospitals and all our medical staffs. We have a really preponderance of heads nodding yes. We want to be part of a volunteer faculty to train young doctors. I was really personally kind of amazed at that response to our medical staff. So it means a lot to them to give back and to have baby doctors around, if you will, to train and teach them and to do the right thing and take good care of their patients. So it truly is a win-win for us. We could have done this on our own, but we chose to have an academic sponsor for many very good reasons. Our volunteer faculty would like a post on from an academic medical center as a title. No payment, but yet they do like that status and that title. That is very, very important, not to mention all the resources that would be available through a College of Medicine. So I too could go on all day about the partnership, but we are just thrilled to be part of this. It came at a really good time for us, and we're growing real fast. Our first class for graduate medical education will actually be next year. So we'll have a little bit of head start and get a foothold on this when the first class graduates in 4 years, or 5 years, I guess.
Thank you, Dr. Nesbitt, and Mr. Chairman. I wholeheartedly endorse this proposal, and I think it not only will be great for the University of Houston, but it'll be great for the people of the Third Ward. It'll be great for the city of Houston. It'll be great for the state of Texas, and ultimately it's going to be great for the U.S. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rabin.
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Anwar.
One thing I would like to mention, not only it's not mentioned here, they have 48 acres that medical school, if they need, they can develop their facilities. That's a great asset, 48 acres.
Thank you. Mr. Steen?
So the institution's proposal states within the program's first 10 years of operation that it has two goals. Number one was 50% of its graduates select to practice primary care, and 50% of its graduates are from underrepresented minorities. So I understand how you get to number two, and Mr. Anwar was asking about how you reach that goal of 50% of your graduates select to practice primary care. And Chancellor, in your presentation, that was the very first point you mentioned, was the shortage of primary care physicians. So, Doctor, going back to that slide where you talked about how can we achieve the goal of 50% of graduates choosing primary care specialties, and you do have a hill to climb. I think I didn't realize that, but you're saying that they can go into these other specialties and earn 2 or 3 times more. And Mr. Anwar asked a very good question about incentives. So, are you just coming up with this? These ways, or has this been done in other parts of the country? Is there something you can look to say, well, another university pursued this and they were able to accomplish it?
So before I pass on to Dr. Span for technical question, I'll tell you from my point of view, I asked exactly the same question. How do you tell me if 20% is the norm, how do you tell me you're going to buck the norm and get it 50%? And they gave me every kind of strategy, and I said, well, I'm an outcome person. Is it even possible? So then we visited in Florida, the schools. Florida State University, after now 15 years, has 50% of their students actually end up choosing the primary care. So one message I got, it is possible to do. It may be extremely hard to do. It may be a more cultural issue, and we have to develop culture from the very beginning about the value of primary care, the passion for serving community, and we have to keep those students close so that they can continue to foster that love and continue to remember that this is why they are there, so they have a choice. So with that, I grilled my team quite a bit on that issue. So now I'll let Dr. Spen try to convince you, because he did convince me on that. So.
Doctor, could someone slide so we can be looking at that while you're talking? Page 6.
So it's a fair question, and it's not just Florida State University, but we also visited Florida International University, that's been in place for 10 years, same kind of output. We did not visit Southern Illinois University, but they have the same track record. We visited UC, University of California, Riverside, and that is their goal, and they are using similar best practices. I think it would be cynical to say that medical students only vote with their wallets, although I think some of the decision making is financially based. But there are other issues. One is there are some very clear predictors of primary care specialty choice. Those include coming from a rural area, coming from a family with parents that are in a service profession, such as teachers or clergy. Having done something between college and medical school, like Peace Corps or Teach for America, having volunteered in a community health setting, a primary care setting. So there actually are ways to select in your admission process students who are more likely to choose primary care specialties. I can't tell you just how important the culture of a medical school is. There have been reams of articles written about the hidden curriculum. And here's how the hidden curriculum works. So I'm rotating on endocrinology, and I tell my professor, you know, I think I'm going to become a family doctor. And he looks at me and says, you know, Steve, I think you're too smart to be a family doctor. You need to become an endocrinologist. Well, I put on the table that I am one, so I'm biased, but I happen to think that being a great generalist primary care physician is the ultimate intellectual challenge in medicine. And so one can build a culture in which the students are told and have a curriculum, a hidden curriculum, a culture that says it's really great to be a primary care doctor. It's the ultimate intellectual challenge. Then there's a curriculum. Most medical schools have a 4-week rotation in family medicine in their third year. We will have our students spend a half a day a week every week of medical school for 4 years in a primary care setting, immersed. In addition to that, those students will be part of an interprofessional student team with nursing students, pharmacy students, social work students, perhaps law students, perhaps optometry students. And each team will be assigned a family with complex medical social problems living in an underserved community. They will visit that family monthly, again for 4 years, to learn about their health care needs, their primary health care needs, their social determinants of health. And that kind of exposure, that is not a hidden, that is an overt curriculum that really emphasizes the importance and the value of primary care. Yes, we think that incentives are important. We are working toward those, but we believe that by applying these other best practices, we will be equally successful to those medical schools that have already shown this kind of outcome. I hope that answers your question.
That was an excellent answer. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chairman Stedman.
So the proposal is excellent, comprehensive, and I was particularly impressed when I mentioned at the committee meeting that you brought your corporate partner, Dr. Desmet, to the meeting and was able to answer questions then and now. I asked this question when Dr. Couture, you were not here, but and it in no way really affects my enthusiasm for your proposal. But what's the chance that this medical school will be located on campus versus the medical center, and when will that decision be made?
So we are very fortunate that we do have, we actually started out with 4 proposed sites, and 2 have been knocked out now, so there's still 2. One is on campus, of course, with that 49 acres of the land that we have. And then another one is, of course, in Texas Medical Center. Both have their pros and cons. We have been asked by the board to do an extensive analysis of academic pros and cons and financial pros and cons. We are almost finishing that analysis. We'll present that to our Board of Regents November meeting, along with the recommendation, and I think it was a very strong recommendation from the expert committee that was sent by coordinating board, recommending to us strongly that we build the medical school on campus as opposed to Texas Medical Center. So board will consider that. And we hoping that if our board gets answered all the questions, that in November they will decide which site to go for. Now, from the analysis that we have at this point, I can tell you everything is favoring more that we build on campus, but we might have a very unique opportunity to build a life science campus because we are the only medical school in Houston, even though there are 2 others and some others are, in a smaller presence. we will be the one that's a part of a comprehensive university. Dean Espan will report to the provost. He sits in the Dean's Council. So it is a very integrated one. So we'll have the decision in November, but at least we have both land and we have both sites.
Yeah, I'm a believer, and I guess you'd mentioned this before, just when we visited. I mean, but I'm certainly a believer in the power of sort of intellectual cross-fertilization and building up, you know, your existing programs. But also, Mr. Raven is a good point. I mean, how can you serve, you know, the Third Ward effectively if, you know, it's in the medical center and not on campus? But again, that decision does not dampen my enthusiasm for your proposal. But I have to admit, I have a personal bias that be on campus.
Well, thank you. And no matter where we build it, our presence will be in both locations. That's almost determined. Even if, let's say, by any chance the board decides to put medical school in Texas Medical Center, the clinic will be still on campus in the Third Ward. If we decided to put the medical center here, there will be a research building in Texas Medical Center. So we'll have presence in both the places.
Question, Mr. Anwar?
Yeah, we have such a shortage for primary care and also a rural area. You think so because of that, the financial gap between the specialist and the general practitioner will narrow over time period? What's your thinking?
Well, I spent 4 years practicing as a country doctor in rural North Carolina, so I'm very intimately familiar with those issues. And it is true that I think rural physicians struggle more than urban physicians because there's more poverty, regardless of the specialty. And it's certainly true that in our current reimbursement system, which is fee-for-service based and procedurally oriented, primary care doctors typically earn less than specialists. That's beginning to change. As you probably know, our health system is moving away from fee-for-service towards more value-based reimbursement. And in those reimbursement systems, physicians, particularly primary care physicians, are paid for keeping patients well, for keeping them out of the hospital, for delivering high-quality care, and they get to share in the savings to the system. And it turns out that physicians who are working, primary care physicians who are working in value-based reimbursement systems today, that gap has narrowed significantly. I would predict that it will narrow even more. Will there ever be parity between a family doctor and a heart surgeon? Probably not. But I think those gaps are going to narrow. And I think that will apply in rural areas as well as in urban areas.
I want one more question then. Do you believe in telecare, or do you rather have the doctor physically see the patient? What's your opinion about that?
I personally have been doing telemedicine for over 10 years. You know, initially it was someone taking a photo of a rash on the weekend to send to me so I could tell them what their kid had. But, you know, now you know, live video conferencing is alive and well. And I believe that all physicians, regardless of their location or their specialty, are going to increasingly use telehealth to take better care of patients. I think we can provide better care when we can interact with them when they need it. We can solve many of their problems that way without them having to come to the doctor or the hospital. And I believe that it's going to continue to revolutionize medical practice, not only in rural areas, but in urban areas as well.
Okay. Mr. Raven, you have
Yes,
a comment?
Dr. Span, I had just a question. In your efforts to attain this 50% of primary care physicians, can you talk to us a little bit about what is the impact of the reputation of the school in the sense that that's what your focus is, and attracting students who are coming to the school because that's what they want to do?
I believe that will be very important, and we're already hearing from students, let alone faculty, who know of our mission and are anxious to join us. But I believe that that will be the competitive advantage of our school, so to speak. I think it will be known for producing primary care doctors. I think it will attract young people who are passionate about that, and will just enhance our ability to produce great primary care physicians at the rate that we hope to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Span, I have a question on holistic approach, I think, at the committee meeting. By the way, for those that are listening, because I know a lot of folks are really interested in this medical schools and all the things that the coordinating board is doing, is that the coordinating board and our committee has spent many hours before this, as last month, on this topic. And I appreciate the University of Houston and Houston system providing information to all our board in advance, and some of us have been studying this for over a year. And so we really appreciate there's been a lot of work and data. My thing on the holistic approach question is there going to be any minimum MCAT score requirements or grade point average requirements in a holistic approach?
It's a good question. There will likely be some floor. I think it will be substantially below the average MCAT or GPA for Texas medical school applicants or those admitted to Texas medical schools. There has to be some minimum ability and knowledge and ability in terms of science and so forth. But again, in a holistic approach, that is not the main consideration. In fact, in the holistic approach, in our approach, the search committee, the admissions committee, I should say, will be blinded as to MCAT and GPA until the last step in the decision-making process. So, yes, there will be some low floor, but that will not be our primary consideration in accepting these students.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, oh yes, Ms. Acosta.
Yeah, I just wanted to just make sure that we recognize State Representative Coleman from District 147, who sent all of the members of the coordinating board a letter of support for the University of Houston College of Medicine.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I will call, yes. Yeah, Commissioner, do you have a question?
I just wanted to find out what the institutional response to the two recommendations were.
The
response to the two recommendations.
Oh, okay, good question. So on the first one, would we try to strive for that? Absolutely. I mean, not only for College of Medicine, we try to do that for all of our students. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that we are an opportunities university. We believe in that, and affordability. I mean, we are lower than national and state average in terms of affordability. So would we try to? Absolutely. But I also want you to know that our tuition that we have built for College of Medicine is not actually outside of the box in terms of what professional school tuitions are. If you look at our law college, look at our optometry, look at our pharmacy, they are roughly in the same band. So we did not start out by building a huge tuition cost for medical students and then say, let's go half low, because we know what our mission is. So absolutely, we're deadly committed to that. Second one, in terms of the faculty, honestly speaking, I could give you a resume of 20 faculty today. Those who have expressed the interest, who have contacted me or Dr. Span, those who want to come and work. But, you know, we have to go. We have to get approval from you first. We have to build it sound, you know, financially and academically. So no problem at all.
Okay, Mr. Anwar. Okay, so yeah, I have a motion to adopt the committee's recommendation of approval of the University of Houston Doctor of Medicine degree with a major in medicine by Mr. Anwar, seconded by Mr. Raven. Any questions or discussion left? Do I call for a vote? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're moving on to agenda item 10D, and that's consideration of adopting the recommendation of the board relating to the request from the University of North Texas Health Science Center for a Doctor of Medicine degree with a major in medicine. Yeah, okay. Do we want to take a little minor break? Okay. I know, well, everybody wanted to congratulate them, I guess, but that's okay, we need to, okay, I think we can do that. Take care. Have a safe trip, we'll see you soon. I think we need to go congratulate them, too.
Oh, I can't sit for a long time.
I know, I know.
Hi.
This was the committee.
Oh, no, this is no, we had the committee meeting about a month ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Because I think this is the full.
yeah,
Is the next item the full board approval?
yes.
Who's John?
Okay, I'll start it, but that's fine. Take your time.
No, this is,
Okay, so we're moving on to item 10D. Again, would like to welcome to the meeting here the folks from the North Texas Health Science Center. And Dr. Silverman, would like to, first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stuart Flynn. Welcome back, the Dean of the School of Medicine at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. Thank you for being here. Also, we would like to welcome Dr. Michael Williams. Thank you for being here. President of the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And also, is Mr. Greg Anderson here? He was going to. Okay, he's welcome to come up if he'd like, or from there is fine. We'd just like to introduce him.
Dr. Ferris, can I make a real quick correction?
Oh, yes, I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Flynn had a personal issue late last night and was not able to make it, so I've asked Dr. Charles Taylor, our provost, who's
Okay.
here with me, and we didn't get to be able to tell people fast enough. So.
No problem. Thank you. Dr. Taylor is the provost, and welcome, Dr. Taylor. And then Mr. Greg Anderson is Executive Vice President of Finance and Operations from the University of North Texas Health Science Center. Okay, so Dr. Silverman and Dr. Peoples will please start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. At the September Committee on Academic and Workforce Success meeting, the committee approved the staff recommendation for approval, which also included these two recommendations. The first is that the institution commits to providing financial support to cover 50% of the tuition and fees for students with demonstrated financial need. The second recommendation is that the institution will not seek formula funding for the proposed program. So here's a summary of the staff perspectives. Some highlights, I'll just hit the highlights. The proposed program would prepare physicians for the region, and the budget would depend on a mix of tuition and fees, and institutional funds and donations. And most importantly, again, the institution has a specific plan regarding how they will provide sufficient first-year residency positions to accommodate their graduates. All right. I'm moving on to criterion 1 because you've already seen that the board is required to look at a specific set of criteria. So this actual one, criterion 1, is unnecessary duplication. The staff finding was that the proposed program partially meets this criterion because Fort Worth actually already has UNT's Health Science Center's Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine, and there's also the mature UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. Additionally, Texas A&M University College of Medicine has a presence in Dallas as well. However, the population growth for the region and for Dallas in the metro area Dallas-Fort Worth, is compelling. It's growing very quickly. And again, the need for physicians in the state of Texas is clear. We need more physicians. Additionally, the proposal benefits from having a strong relationship with a private institution. Texas Christian University in Fort Worth has a strong commitment. The partnership is unique nationally, and it's clear that the local area has a strong commitment to develop the program, along with an innovative curriculum, and the development of the empathetic scholar will likely result in a school that meets the region's needs. Also, that innovative approach to education, which includes a flipped classroom and a longitudinal experience beginning in the first year, is also persuasive. Regarding criterion 2, adequate funding. The staff perspective is that the institution meets this. The institution would rely on a mix of funding, including a high tuition and fee for students set at $60,000 annually, which is much higher than other state institutions. But this, again, is a public-private partnership, and they would not seek formula funding for their proposed MD students. With regard to criterion 3, the proposed program meets the criterion. With regard to the faculty in place, the institution already has 32 core faculty in place and 80 faculty that would provide support for the program. Has a long history of offering degrees in health-related areas, including pharmacy, public health, and physical therapy. So staff perspective is that the proposal meets the criterion. Regarding the quality criteria set in rules, the staff perspective is that the proposed program meets these. I will highlight one of these, again, that they offer lots of doctoral programs and master's programs in the related areas, and they've got the faculty and staff in place. Additionally, the institution was able to secure funding to cover the tuition and fees for the inaugural class for the first year of the program. This is, again, the slide you just saw about House Concurrent Resolution 102, prioritizing GME before opening new medical schools. And this, again, is Senate Bill 1066, which actually requires an institution to submit a specific plan if they wish to offer a new MD or DO program. So with regard to that last criterion, the proposal actually meets this, and actually they've submitted a plan that has a development of 130 to 200 new first-year residency positions that would be developed. They've got signed agreements with probably more than this number now, but 17 hospitals and ambulatory practices in the area for clerkship experiences. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Dr. Peoples, do you have any comments? Are you okay? Okay. Okay, Dr. Williams?
Mr. Chairman and members of the coordinating board, Commissioner Paredes, I think in the interest of your time, I'll try to be a lot briefer than I was the first time, but give you hopefully the gist of the program. The program's built on an innovative platform, in my opinion. It starts with the organizational structure of the public-private partnership being innovative. The beauty of that model is, for us, is it brings in the richness of a liberal arts mindset and blend with the sciences. There are parts of the curriculum that cross over into the use of TCU's business school. Okay. Okay. A little closer, I'm sorry. Okay. Business school at TCU for leadership training, the engineering school from the perspective of problem solving and critical assessment of problems, the communication aspects in terms of teaching communication. So there's a lot of blend between the strengths of TCU on the academic side. And so that's where the innovativeness starts on the organizational structure. There's several other innovative pieces that I want to get to in just a minute, but the question always comes back to Why a medical school? Why another new medical school? And I think I gave some explanation of this before, but this medical school, again, is very different. It's a medical school that approaches the training with the goal of training a different kind of provider. Again, I think based on the premise we laid out, the current status of healthcare, the current status of the growing distance between patients and their actual physicians or their healthcare providers is getting wider. The interaction, the human interaction is getting more distant. And with technology taking more of a role in the way care is delivered, there's opportunities where technology can be used to actually almost replace that interaction. When we talk to employers, we ask them, what are you looking for in the health systems and other employers in healthcare? And they gave us a laundry list of characteristics that they feel like they have to try to remediate physicians that they hire. And those are in the areas of trying to give some emotional intelligence trainings, trying to give some training around communication skills, the ability to work on a team, the ability to be a follower of a team as well as a leader of a team. And there were several more, but that gives you a sense of what the employers in healthcare are saying about graduates of current medical schools. There are approximately 177 medical schools in the United States. Almost all of them are still training in the post-Flexner environment that was established in 1910. We think it's a real time to change the ultimate provider that's being produced. So our curriculum is built on a very different model. It's a curriculum that's built on a much more ambulatory-focused model. It's less hospital-centric. It's intended to have our students very comfortable from day one working in what we think are the move in healthcare is to find where's the highest value for the care to be delivered, whether that is telemedicine, whether that is in a mobile clinic setting, whether that's at the home site, whether that's in some other form of care delivery. So that's another difference as well. The faculty is heavily based, as you saw in the numbers, on a community faculty-based model with fewer full-time FTEs faculty, and it's a faculty committed to the spirit and the science and the art of education. The faculty that ultimately come on board from the community go through some rigorous training around the process and learning how to be better educators. So different kind of curriculum, different kind of faculty, different kind of organizational structure, all with the goal of turning out a provider that has those skills that we saw or we heard from the employers, a provider that's selected and trained intentionally to have those new skills. There's assessments already in place that we're already putting through with several of our other students in pilot studies around emotional intelligence and understanding how we assess emotional intelligence, how we work to elevate emotional intelligence. We know from studying the data in the U.S. medical schools that if you track empathy and altruism, students come in with high levels of empathy and altruism, but over the 4-year period of the traditional post-Flexner curriculum, the curve shifts downward, and that altruism and empathy is literally beat out of them. And I can speak from personal experience, although I think somehow I'm trying to be a more empathetic guy these days. I think what we saw was we began looking worldwide at other models. And some of the models we found that showed sustained empathy and altruism in a provider, which is what we want, were found in Australia and Canada. So a lot of the original models that we began looking at were from Australia and Canada, all with the goal of training this new kind of provider that comes out with empathy and altruism. We want them to be, I already mentioned leadership, teamwork, problem solvers. We want them to be trained in discovery. So they have a 4-year research project that they work on that leads to a published paper at the end of the process. That's so they understand critical analysis skills of research. They understand the research process. Another unique piece is they're given a single cohort of patients that they follow for the whole 4 years. They see a lot of other patients, don't get me wrong, but there's that connection to a mentor physician and a group of patients that they get to know their families very well. They get to know all the different things they go through, the families go through over those 4 years. We're heavy into coaching, and so many of our faculty are going through international coaching federation training to understand how to be coaches, how to teach our students how to be coaches. We think coaching from a healthcare provider with the patient interaction is extremely important in this environment where we see with all kinds of population health issues related to patients not understanding how to take their medication or not understanding the care they're being given. When we see 50% of prescribed medicines are never filled, then there's significant non-adherence rates because, by and large, the education is not delivered in the intervention between the physician and the patient. So we're looking for a different kind of individual. I told you we want physicians that graduate that are active listeners. I told you that the average physician, this is AMA data, the average patient in the physician interaction in the office or clinic or hospital is interrupted in the first 17 seconds of their story. It's not possible to get the whole story if you're not willing to be an active listener. And as we were taught, so the patient will often give you the diagnosis. The physician has to shift, in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, especially around what we're trying to build, from that model of being, we were taught to be the all-knowing source of healthcare information. You're the problem solver, you're the one with the answers, the patient comes to you for the answers. We have to shift that because now patients have access to answers on our smartphones, on other access tools. The information is everywhere. What we have to have are physicians who are comfortable being the educator and the navigator that helps that patient find the best course of action to solve their healthcare problems. So that's another part of this training that we've got in place. We want students that are very comfortable with data and technology, but again, it's not to supplant or take the place of that personal human interaction that we think is so key to healing. So I think, there's, Dr. Silverman was right. We're not here to take any state formula funding. We think the model that we have designed, we're very proud of it. We think it's forward thinking, and that is matched up against our almost, 48-year now history of running the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. We've got a lot of long years of success. And I would encourage Dr. Spann to come visit our campus. We've had a sustainable primary care delivery level of over 60%. We've led all the medical schools in Texas at a level of 60% of primary care production every year. He's right, what he said about a culture. It takes building a culture. I cannot sit here and guarantee you that all these students are going to go into some specialty. But what I can tell you is we can build a culture around the patient and we can select the right patients, as he said, to drive to a primary care end if that's our goal. The point is, where we are today, we have a strong primary care history with a strong osteopathic school that, by the way, just got awarded a 10-year accreditation window, which is unheard of because of its performance in accreditation. It's scoring at the 99% level in the USLME against all medical schools. They scored the highest on the osteopathic testing as well in the nation. So I'm proud to say that it's definitely not only the top osteopathic school in the country, it's also one of the top in the country of all medical schools in primary care, geriatrics, rural care. And so we think that school is definitely in the sweet spot, and it's a demonstrated model of success and excellence that we can follow with this model. You hear us talk about, and you heard us talk about last time, the empathetic scholar, and Dr. Taylor may reference that some more. I think the key to that is back to my comments about empathy and altruism and our desire to protect that at a high level for these students. We're blessed with this current millennial population that believes in altruism, believes in service. We just don't want to take that away from them. Dr. Silverman made comments about the area in Fort Worth, so I won't go into that as to why I think it fits where we are. I think a couple more things I would say is it's important for you to know that the assets that we already have on the ground that in many ways you've been a part of helping our success, we are one of the 8 designated National Libraries of Medicine in the U.S., which is a significant achievement and sets up the medical school to have that kind of access to data and resources. I think we have a well-established culture of service, and also I'm determined that this medical school opens, and we just opened a brand new building for the school to be on our campus, and the reason why is because we're huge believers in the team-based model of care. So you put these medical students right next to our other 5 health science centers which we're the only health science center in the state that has a pharmacy school on the health science center campus. All the other pharmacy schools are set apart geographically from their main campuses. We think these students interacting with each other while they're training begins to set up the culture that they'll interact with each other going into practice. I mean, one of the biggest issues we have in the U.S. is the disconnection, the lack of integration of medical professionals talking to each other as a team around the patient. So we're trying to change that with a different kind of provider and a different kind of coalition, if you will, to create those opportunities for those collisions to occur. We have signed UME agreements, undergraduate medical education agreements with 6 major health systems and the largest physician-only ACO in the state. That does give us access. As Dr. Silman says, it's grown quite a bit since the site visit. I think we're almost over 40 hospitals now, much more than we're going to probably be able to use with just a 60 student enrollment. But we're proud of the relationship because we think it shows strong support for our project. We are contributing to through the National Residency Match Program, new GME opportunities, now of going to be over 1,100 new spots. Now, 450 of those are former osteopathic residencies that have now gone through the rigorous review by the ACGME and have been converted over to ACGME-approved residencies. There's 650 other residencies that have been created with the commitments Dr. Silva related to you with our partnerships with Baylor Scott & White System and our partnership with Hospital Corporation of America. In answer to one of the questions you asked, the leader from Hospital Corporation of America, I'll just also put in our 2 cents, what we've heard from HCA and Baylor. I think they see it as it's invigorating to be around students when you're out in practice. There's an opportunity there to make you stay on the cutting edge. It's also, quite frankly, from a business perspective, creates a pipeline of talent that is a constant pipeline of people interested in understanding your hospital system. So we're very proud of those 2 partnerships as well as all the other hospital system partnerships we've had. And we're very proud of that GME production, which puts us well over the 1.1 to 1. In direct attention to Commissioner Perez's question about the 2 recommendations, I'll just go straight to that. The main one I think that he was concerned about was the 50% tuition support. I think what I said before and what I stand here to say before you today, we will work hard towards that goal. I cannot commit to that goal today, but we have set aside 15% of the total pro forma to offset scholarships. We've raised almost $2 million in scholarship endowment money. TCU is launching between a $750 to $1 billion campaign, of which some of that money is going to be set aside for student scholarships. And we have a naming gift in the works that will also be, a certain amount of that will be set aside to student scholarships. We have both long histories, both of us, both partners, in delivering financial aid, and we are committed to that because we certainly understand and sensitive to the tuition debt issue. Compare that to our performance on the state side of the coin. We have not raised tuition at the UNT Health Science Center over the last 6 years since I've been there, and we are now at least in the lower third, if no higher than the middle of all the medical school and other health science center costs related to tuition costs. So we are very sensitive to that issue, and we'll work really hard to address that recommendation. Let's see if there's anything else. I think the last thing I'd probably like to say is I'm, again, proud of our long history with TCOM success, proud of our GME. And the last thing I would like to share with you is since we were here in September, in June of this past year when the coordinating board site visit came through, we also, in this very same week, went through the LCME site visit. And the LCME board meeting was held October 9th through the 11th. And we just received recognition and that we have received LCME accreditation, provisional accreditation, so that we can go forward. And so that was a significant achievement, a significant ask of the LCME to believe in a very innovative model, kind of one of its kind, and they did that with great support. The letter that we received was completely citation-free and all within compliance, which I also am told is unheard of. So I'm very proud of the work the team has done with Dr. Flynn and Dr. Taylor's leadership on the academic side. I'm proud of the community support for this school in Fort Worth. It's very robust. I'm very proud of how this will blend in with our other schools. One of the questions some of you may have that I'll just go ahead and address, this already has done nothing but enhance the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. TCOM historically has had to have students travel all over the state of Texas for their clinical training. They're now going to have access to several health systems because when we signed those UME agreements, they were for all of our 6 schools, not just the MD school. And so it's going to open up opportunities for one of my goals when I came back home, if you will, to Fort Worth and to my alma mater at Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine was to create a way our students could train locally and not have to travel. And so those opportunities are going to be there for them now. And now with these 1,100 GME slots moving into the ACGME side, I'm hopeful that almost all of them will stay in Texas. So I will stop there, and if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, turn it over to Dr. Taylor and
That's
see if
fine.
he has a comment.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Dr. Taylor.
Thank you very
welcome.
much. I'm proud to be here in support of this proposal and look forward to just highlighting a few things very specifically about the curriculum that I know Dr. Flynn would love for me to channel him at this moment. First of all, 2 points I'd like to make. One is referencing access, and the second one around quality. In terms of access, we've heard today the importance of primary care and the tremendous need for access to physicians and healthcare providers. This proposal builds upon our culture of primary care. You heard us describe our history, our wonderful history with TCOM, and our pipeline into primary care. The synergy between these 2 medical programs will be tremendous and increase the opportunity for individuals to have access to care, and we're very confident in that model. But besides the quantity aspect, I'd like to focus more on the curriculum as a way of transforming lives and the quality piece. We are about defining and producing the next generation of physicians. And we're doing that in a way in which they are emotionally intelligent, they're team-oriented, they're communication savvy, and they're leaders. They're leaders to go out and change what's taking place today. This curriculum is designed, and we refer to it as empathetic scholar. And I'd like to just leave you with a bit more around what that means, because I think it's a very powerful and innovative model, unlike anything we've seen across the country. First of all, when we think about empathy, being empathetic, imagine that graduate, that physician, who is identifying with, respects, and is sensitive to the need of the person standing in front of him or her. In that meaningful moment, that's where health care takes place, in that conversation. And in that moment, we want to ensure that our physicians that we're graduating are able to understand what are the issues at hand. Well, how does the curriculum help us to do that? Day one, they are with patients. They are being coached by other physicians and healthcare providers to understand the complexities of how to do that. There is a sophisticated curriculum that you see in the proposal around communication. Taking that to the next level of understanding the person in front of you and listening carefully and doing that in a way that can get solutions created. We're training them in a model of interprofessional education where individuals are learning with, about, and from one another in a very powerful way. So you learn about what osteopathic medicine is about and the philosophy. You learn about what allopathic medicine is about and the philosophy, and pharmacy, and so on. It's a powerful mechanism to deliver upon this goal of an empathetic scholar. Now let's shift to the scholar side of what that means for us. Yes, we have embedded innovation in the curriculum. You heard flipped classroom and other components. We believe strongly in bringing education science directly into the classroom. So we know that learning is taking place, and it's learning that is adaptive to each type of style that we all come to with and as we learn. But we go further in that, we want them to be able to problem solve. And the way the curriculum is designed and the crescendo effect that takes place as they are seeing a cohort of patients at the very beginning, and throughout this longitudinal approach, as their panel of patients grow and the complexities grow and their coaching is more sophisticated, help them dive deeply into those complexities, again, their learning trajectory is tremendous. But they're also learning that they don't know it all. And as part of a scholar, you have to understand how do you self-direct yourself to constantly learn and grow and know what's emerging around the corner, because that person in front of you depends on you knowing that information. That's why their 4-year thesis is designed around going through the complete cycle of what it takes. When you read that publication, you know what happened and how to go through it and how to interpret that. These are the important elements that we believe that will help us set a pace and a standard that across the country, when we think about defining the future of this profession, we're going to look back and see empathetic scholar as a very important roadmap to do it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I just want to ask Dr. Williams a question. As far as governance is concerned, when you have a private and a public institution, UNT and TCU, so how's that going to work since UNT has their Board of Regents and TCU has their Board of Directors or Board of Trustees?
So we started designing the dual governance model sometime back. I will tell you, it's fully vetted out, but I will tell you the overall structure works to where there's a body that exists between the two boards, but over the dean, over the presidents, that includes the provosts or the presidents, and that's really only for situations where the dean can't make the decision, or the issue has to go through the two provosts, the two presidents, and then get to this board. It doesn't really directly involve the Board of Regents on each side, except for they're completely there to make sure and observe the system works. We then have we haven't designed the actual number, but obviously it's an odd number, and that odd numbered member of that group would be a outside representative that would be impartial but understand education. So just one idea was a chancellor from a community college system or something like that, because it's all really going to be about predominantly student issues or faculty issues that come up that would go to this group. Financial issues and those things would happen from both sides, because our financing of the partnership is completely distinctively different coming from each side. So we've on surface shown this to the Board of Regents in the idea stage. We are now, since the stages we had to walk through, if you look at it from the two sides, where TCU we both had to have LCME approval. TCU then has to have SACS approval, which they had initiated. We have shared assets where we're sharing our medical library and other assets like that. And then we have, of course, the LCME and then the coordinating board, and then we have SACS. So part of the move between here and SACS will be this finalization of this dual governance agreement. So I hope that helps explain how that works.
No, it does. Thank you. Mr. Steen?
So, Dr. Williams, you mentioned about your osteopathic school having this 60% with primary care. And when you have a DO degree, do you have the same range of specialties you can go in as an MD?
Yes. I graduated from TCOM in the dark ages. There was a lot of heavy bias. I ended up ultimately I was the first DO into the anesthesia program at UT Southwestern. I was one, if not the first DO to be trained at Dr. Cooley's program at the Texas Heart Institute. So it was an opportunity back in the late 70s, early 80s, and late 80s to break through some of those barriers. When I was going to school at Texas College of Obstetric Medicine, we were not allowed to step foot in John Peter Smith Hospital. Now, John Peter Smith Hospital, our county public hospital in Fort Worth, is our largest academic partner in terms of taking our students. So we have graduates from TCOM that are neurosurgeons at the UT Houston system. We have some that are neurologists in the Cleveland Clinic system. We had a graduate a few years ago that scored the highest in the nation on the National Orthopedic Exam and is an orthopedic resident now at Mayo Clinic. No, there are no limitations to that. A lot of those limitations died off gradually over the period from the 70s to the late 80s, early 90s.
Good. And just while we have you here, and I know this is deviating a little bit, but when you heard the previous presentation, is their plan a good one for achieving their 50% goal? Is there anything that you would add to that?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it takes time. You have to build the culture. You have to build a culture because as Dr. Spann alluded to, there is a wide discrepancy in family, or I won't say family physicians. We consider primary care, just for clarity of definition, to be family medicine, pediatrics, and OB-GYN, which is an internal medicine. Those four groups are what's nationally considered as primary care.
What are the four again?
Internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, and OB-GYN. Because every single one of them, for many women, their OB-GYN is their only physician. And so those four are considered primary care. The vast predominance of our 60% are for family medicine, by and large. But so on general terms, he's exactly right that the discrepancy in payment, even though I was a specialist, I was an intensivist and anesthesiologist, so I ran ICUs. The discrepancy between what a family medicine doctor made and what either I made or even my neurosurgery colleagues or cardiovascular surgery colleagues was dramatically different. But they were on the front lines doing a lot of hard work. And I think I do agree with another thing you said, and that is I do think that discrepancy, that distance is going to shorten or shrink. But I think you've got, in terms of the success with primary care, you've got to build a culture of primary care, and it's got to be a culture that's focused on service. And that's part of losing that factor of altruism. If you drive altruism out of a group of people, what goes along with that is service goes out the window, and there becomes this sense of delayed gratification that I'm not really to wait any longer, so I'm going to go to the bigger specialties to make more money. Those kinds of things began to happen in people. We think maintaining the empathy, maintaining the altruism through a curriculum change and the way the whole faculty comes around them, starting them with patients of day one and having them stay with the same cohort of patients their entire 4 years, so they get to know the patient as not that patient in room 205 that has a gallbladder issue, but it's Mr. Martinez that has a daughter who's also got cancer. It's that at that level. And it doesn't matter what specialty they ultimately go into for us, because I can't guide that either. I can't promise you that I can guide students to go into certain specialties. What I care about mostly is that when they get out there, whether they're a neurosurgeon or a primary care doctor, they're going to deliver care with that same level of empathy, altruism, communication skills, and care. But he's exactly right. For them to be successful driving higher levels of primary care, it's going to have to require an intentional build of culture.
Okay, good. Just on yours, Commissioner, do you have the same concerns about this proposal? The same that you expressed about...
Well, I have the same concern generally, but obviously this proposal is posited on the notion of not asking for formula funding.
And this is what I was going to get at, and I didn't participate in the committee, but of course when we approved Sam Houston, we put that language in there, which we had that discussion about enforceability or whatever. Would this be an appropriate place to have that same language? Are you all saying you'll never seek formula funding?
Right. We're not seeking formula funding. We do want to... Go ahead.
And that is a recommendation that's a part of the proposal itself. I mean, it's a part of the recommendation that we're making to the board for approval. That's approval with those two recommendations. And one
Well,
of which is that.
I think that we approved the last one with 2 recommendations, but those are just recommendations. I think the way we did it with Sam Houston State, there's a little bit more teeth in it.
Mr. Steen, I will also tell you that for what it's worth, Representative Guerin and I both gave testimony to the one of the higher ed committees, the House Higher Ed Committee, I believe it was, to that exact question. And then when we put House Bill 1913 in place to allow us to offer the MD degree, the legislative intent was clear, and that's what I think led to the support we got, which was basically 180 to 1 across both houses. So we do want to be able to participate in state-supported GME growth, because we're committed still to growing more GME, but not formula funding.
So when we approved Sam Houston, it was on the condition, so it's different than a recommendation that they will never seek, nor if offered ever accept any formula funding. That's pretty strong language. Would you be willing to accept that?
You know, I hate to address future leaders or bound them down, but that's where we stand today. And that's what I've told the legislature, and that's you know, on 2 different levels.
Okay, I have a question again. Holistic admissions, is that what you'll be using or not?
Well, I think, again, there's different definitions of that. Holistic admissions from our perspective is that makeup of that entire model of provider we're trying to train. So from the perspective of taking all kinds of different people with a composite of things, and then how they perform through the most important part of our process is probably going to be the interview, and how they make it through interviews that with scenario-based admissions to test for all those skills. Does that answer your question?
Will you have minimum, I'll state it a different way, will you have minimum MCAT scores and minimum GPAs for admissions?
Yes, but I'll echo what Dr. Spann said. It certainly will not be the most important, but I couldn't begin to tell you today what those will be. We think you certainly have to have the capability to do the scholarly work, but we think there's other variables than just those 2 things to measure to be able to determine that. I'm not sure how. Dr. Taylor, do you have any other comments on that?
No, the only thing I would add is with the holistic process, you're right, the variables are set, so the MCAT, those components are just one of many, and they're weighted in a way that you're looking at having that balance that looks at success for students. So I think that's your.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we don't want to do, the worst thing we want to do is miss a really good student that has all the aptitude and ability, but they may have not performed at the top level on the MCAT.
Yeah, I guess my reasoning for that question is because you could probably fill a class with 4.0s and perfect MCAT scores, but that's not
the class we want.
That's right. Well, that's what I was getting at.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
that's okay.
That is absolutely not the class we want. I would echo actually what Dr. Spann said. I can't tell you speak for the dean as to whether those scores would be blinded the way he mentioned it in the U of H presentation, but I will tell you, far and away, the more overwhelming part of the piece will be the levels of emotional intelligence, their ability, their starting ability around team, all those things I talked about.
Right, because I mentor a lot of students that are wanting to go to grad school and med school, and you know, they have so much more to offer than just an MCAT score and a GPA. And I think that's why, you know, I'm a big proponent for holistic admissions.
I wouldn't normally do this on public record, but I'll go ahead and do it. I was one of those people. I was one of those people who did not very well on the MCAT at all, because I really wasn't coached well to prepare for it, and had probably a medium-level GPA. But at the end of the day, I had a 26-year successful career, and I ended up, you know, as the first DO at UT Southwestern, which was at the time was the largest anesthesia residency in the country, over 100 residents. I ended up being the chief resident. And that's not about me from a perspective of arrogance. It's just about the point that I just don't want us to miss people who can interact with people.
Right.
And make a difference in how we deliver care, because that's what we're missing, in my opinion.
Okay. And Mr. Wilson?
You partially answered my question about my concern is, does your new MD program come at any expense of your DO program. And you partially answered it that your residency, your GME slots are for both, so that's a positive for your DO program. But if I'm a student, and it sounds like you're looking for the culturally or for the same type of student for your MD and your DO program, as far as their makeup and desire to serve and that. So if I walk in and I want to be a doctor, how do I decide which way to go?
We're going to tell you to apply to both. Because at the end of the day, what we're starting to see already is, even though I think I told you before in September, in my opinion, it's almost impossible to transform an existing school that's already set in its curriculum and already set with accrediting bodies recognizing it a certain way. What we're already seeing is the two deans, the interim dean at TCOM and Dean Flynn, working together. The TCOM is already beginning to adapt some of the admission kind of tools that they're going to use in the MD school, and they're working together on that. I think what we see, as I've told, I just recently with the TCOM group celebrating their 10-year accreditation piece, there's so many good things about TCOM. TCOM is the anchor school and the founding aspect of the Health Science Center. There's nothing we want to do to ever damage them in any way. In fact, quite frankly, is to help enhance and grow them over time as appropriate. But they were needing some things. They were needing the opportunity because not only did we open up GME opportunities, we opened up undergraduate opportunities. So those medical students will now have rotation opportunities in the Fort Worth, Dallas area that were not there before. I think, I don't want to make this so much about me, but I'm an example of how it can work. When I graduated from Texas Heart Institute in Houston, finished my fellowship at Texas Heart Institute in Houston, it was an opportunity to go and practice. I ended up practicing the only DO of an all MD group in 2 different cities. And I never had a single problem because all they cared about was what's the quality of what you deliver and are you willing to work hard? And that's what we want our students to understand, that it's not what your label is as much as it understanding the value of the different providers that come around the patient, and that's what we're really about. And so, Mr. Wilson, I think I just had this question asked to me actually by a prospective student just 2 days ago. And I told him, I said, look, I was you. I just wanted to be a physician. I didn't know the difference in a DO and an MD. So I would encourage you to apply across the board. And what I really care about is how you come out as an individual physician. So we're not going to do anything to damage them or hurt them. In fact, we want to continue to enhance. I think there's lessons. Several years ago, we had the LCME come through to look at the feasibility of us doing an MD school. And when the LCME, one of the reviewers was leaving, his comment was, I'm going to ask you to do one favor for me. If you ever get an MD school, please teach our MD students how to touch people and interact with people the way your DO students do, because that's where medicine has to go. We think that's why we're really not putting this school in the medical district of Fort Worth. We're putting it on our campus because we want those interactions to happen. And those.
So for clarity, the new MD school is going to be adjacent to the other school?
We've already opened a new building. It's right on our campus.
Yeah, so it's right there.
And it's actually in the same building with the pharmacy school, and that was very intentional as well.
And I do agree with your comment that I think you almost have to create a culture from the ground up. If we're talking about general practice doctors, I believe that it's hard to convert a culture to a new line of thinking. So it's better to start from scratch.
We think so. And again, we think there's synergies that will happen among both. I mean, in teaching some of the interprofessional education case studies that we do, where we have TCU nursing students, we have TCU nutrition students, TCU social worker students, our MD students, our DO students, pharmacy students, PA students, all of them around this case. And what they do, well, if you test them before and you test them after, what you find is going in before, there are tons of biases, just blind bias and prejudice against each different provider type, whether they're, all pharmacists are obsessive compulsive. All doctors just want to give you all the answers. Nurses don't do anything, all that stuff. And we test them after this series of case studies. And what we find is there's a whole new renewed appreciation for each, the value that each bring around the table. So it's about creating that opportunity to the benefit of the patient. That's what we're trying to do.
Great. Thank
Great.
you.
Any other questions? If not, Mr. Steen?
I was going to go ahead and make a motion to approve, but to include that same language that we used for Sam Houston State, which is that it conditioned that they will never seek nor if offered ever accept any formula funding.
And do I have a second? Or is there any discussion first? Do I have a second? Okay, we do not have a second. Okay, so that does not pass. So if there are any other, now I can accept a motion. The motion to adopt the committee's recommendation, which is, of course, the request for the University of North Texas Health Science Center for the Doctor of Medicine degree with a major in medicine. We have a motion by Mr. Raven, second by Mr. Plank. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
And one no. So we record that. Mr. Steen voting no. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Williams and Dr. Taylor for your presentations today, and congratulations. I also want to make a special thanks notes to our staff at the coordinating board, Dr. Silverman, Dr. Peebles, and all your team for all the hard work you've done over many months, not only this proposal, but the Houston proposal and the previous proposal, Sam Houston. I mean, it's the information you've provided not only to the institutions and the systems, but also to the board members. We really do appreciate the hard work and the efforts, even after hours and everything. Commissioner, the staff has done a great job on preparing for all these proposals, so we thank you all very much.
We'd like to personally thank also Dr. Goman, especially because he really worked hard from the coordinating board staff as well, in addition.
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course. Like I said, their whole team has been exceptional, and we continue to rely on them, and they always provide the information that we need. So thank you. And again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on our agenda items 10E, F, G, and H are on the consent calendar. Agenda item 10I is a consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board relating to the report on the effectiveness of advice Texas. Per Rider 5385th Texas Legislature regular session. Members, you have a copy of the report in the materials, and Jarrell Booker will give the report. Jarrell?
Interest of time, I'm Jarrell Booker, Assistant Commissioner of College Readiness and Success. I'm very excited to talk to you about Advise Texas. As some of you may remember, Advise Texas is a near-peer program where we have recent graduates go back into areas that have challenges attending college, some socioeconomic, to help give advice around applying, FAFSA, whatever it needs around best fit of going to college. 2 sessions ago, we received our first appropriation from the state legislature of $4 million. Prior to that, we had received federal funding and mixed funding from our College Advising Corps partners to actually implement Advise Texas. So what you're seeing is a culmination of multiple funding sources going back to 2012. We finally have state funding now, and we have an evaluation for that. Now, just to give you a reminder about the project, with these advisors placed in these high schools, they work very closely with K-12 counselors, so it's not them by themselves. It's a partnership with a number of institutions, Texas A&M, University of Texas at Austin, Trinity, and TCU, and then from that, they actually partner with the school districts. This map is a kind of shows a quick example of where they are. You can tell how they're clustered in areas with large populations of low-income or underrepresented populations across the state. You can see that UT is mostly in Austin and going out to El Paso and some in the Dallas area. Texas A&M around the Houston, Dallas, and the Valley. And then you see where obviously TCU is staying up there in Fort Worth, and then Trinity down in the San Antonio area. So, the evaluation, we work very closely with the College Advising Corps and Dr. Eric Benger at Stanford to conduct a study where they looked at 5 major areas: impact on college enrollment, impact on persistence, pathways to college, school culture, and the advisors' attitudes and life choices. It also consisted of a randomized control trial, which we were excited to have, which tried to look at high schools that were in the program the longest, going back to 2012, and as long as we had some consistency of schools that were in the program, those are the ones included into the randomized controlled trial. Now, just to give you an idea, just in 2017 alone, they served over 40,000 high school students, and just the dollar amount of awards and institutional aid of $476 million shows you that this program has some sort of reach in the state. Obviously, there are a lot more high school students, but when we served over 110 high schools in the state, we're reaching a very good population to give an idea of what we have. Now, if I don't show you anything else, I at least want to point out this first bullet that just from 2016 to 2017, we had over 2 percentage points for high schools increase for college enrollment and persistence. Now, that's a substantial number. It's a very small number to the average person, but that's about 2,000 more students going to college than there were before this program was put in place. And if you just look at the growth over the state as a whole, as the state only grew maybe 0.4%, the Advised Texas programs grew a little over 2%, which I think is wonderful. The other side of that I want to point out is there were some schools, 20 school districts that saw over 3 percentage points. And one school, which I might point out, had a 23% percentage point growth from the previous year. So once these advisors get in these schools, it changes the way the school does business. It allows the counselors to do what they need to do, and it allows our advisors to support the students to the fullest. We had a number of schools in the Valley that had 8 percentage points increases. So we are very excited about the program and success. We have the same request in our legislative request for this year, and I think this sort of information should serve us well in that sort of ask. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out some of the qualitative findings where they asked advisors whether they enjoyed their experience, whether counselors appreciated them being in the school, whether it improved the college-going culture. Obviously, those were very positive. We knew that would be the case because we provide a great deal of training for these advisors, and the program does require a lot of partnerships with the school districts as well as our partner institutions. That said, I feel confident when we go back this year, although anything can happen in the state legislature, that at least we have positive findings. And if you put time in a program and the commission has been committed to the success of this program, it has shown the results that we wanted as far as more students going to college and staying on the track to attend. That concludes my presentation on Advised Texas.
Okay, thank you, Jarrell. Any questions or discussion for Mr. Booker? Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. Oh, hearing none. Mr.
So
Wilson?
the request for the legislative session, is that going to be in the form of a bill filed or just as a budgetary?
It's a rider budgetary. We got a rider last year, and we're asking for the same amount this year.
Got it.
$4 million.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the committee's recommendation? Moved by Mr. Raven. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Williams. Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item 10J is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the assessment of graduate medical education positions report. This is per Senate Bill 215, 83rd Texas Legislature regular session. Members, you have a copy of this report in your materials. Dr. Peebles?
I let Dr. Silverman do all things medical.
Okay.
So,
Dr. Silverman.
She's going to do this one, then you'll have to put up with me for the rest of it.
Oh, okay. I was just checking.
All right, thank you, Dr. Farias. This report is due to the legislature every even-numbered year, and this particular report is the fourth one and highlights the importance of GME and the importance of the first-year residency positions that are available. By 2020, Texas is poised to now have 15 medical or medical schools available to its students. Texas currently is tied with California for 15 schools, while New York continues to take the lead with 17 medical schools. However, Texas is on the far right-hand side of this slide. Texas just surpassed Pennsylvania with the more first-year entering medical students than any other state except for New York. So we surpassed Pennsylvania with 195 medical students, and we exceed California by 274 first-year medical students. And you'll also note that New York is declined a little bit. So Texas is a leader in medical education, and that clearly shows, and we have clearly increased the enrollment since 2007. That red bar represents 2007, and the green bar on the end represents 2017. Texas medical schools are located in populated areas of the state. The two just recently approved new programs are also shown in this map. They're the purple triangles, kind of near the Metroplex and in the Gulf Coast area. So it's kind of a messy map, but the blue areas on that map actually represent the health professional shortage areas. Those are whole counties that are designated as not having enough primary care providers in the county. So you can see the ones in blue really make up the vast land of the state of Texas. So the Texas medical schools have varying class sizes. So you can see some of our medical schools have been around a long time and have maintained their first-year enrollments. So the bar on the far right side of each of these columns represents 2005, and the sort of teal color on the right side of each bar is 2017. You can see Baylor College of Medicine moved up a little bit, but there was a large growth at A&M, a pretty large growth at Texas Tech, the growth of El Paso becoming a new medical school, and then that UIW represents the first class of the University of the Incarnate Word, and you can see UNT Health Science Center, that's TCOM. So that school has grown and then kind of tapered off a little bit. UT Southwestern really kind of maintained its number around 230. Then you've got UT Austin, UT Health Science Center Houston, which is also pretty much maintained over these years, and San Antonio, UTMB Galveston, and then the last column represents UT RGV, which has 55 students that enrolled in 2017. You can see that in 2003, the National Association of American Medical Colleges recognized the need to increase the medical school enrollments for the nation's medical schools, and really called on all schools to increase their enrollment, hoping to get a national increase of 30%. Texas responded to that call very well, and has since increased its entering class size by 52%. So by 2020, Texas is poised to have approximately 2,300 first-year medical students. So GME, just like the medical schools, are really generally located in the more populated areas of the state. The two notes on here, there are two dots in red highlighting Wichita Falls and Corpus Christi. Those are the two locations that unfortunately experienced closures in their residency programs. So they will no longer have a GME presence for family medicine in Wichita Falls. And while Corpus does have some other residency programs there, one of their family medicine programs shut down. Again, the blue areas are those health professional shortage area counties, which is a federally designated, a designation by the federal government. So I'm pleased to say that this slide shows where we had planning grants, and planning grants were initiated in 2014. And since that time, we've had 20 different planning grants. And as a result of that planning grant, we've been able to award we've been able to award 20, and as a result, we've had 13 new residency programs open statewide. And these are small, sort of startup seed money grants, basically allowing an entity to think about and begin to plan for a residency program. They've been $250,000 currently, and we are about to issue an RFA in the coming months to offer a couple more of these, we hope. So in 2017, Texas exceeded the ratio of 1.1 to 1 with 10% more residency positions than first year or exiting medical graduates. So you can see that kind of right in the middle where it says 2017, that number. Okay, so the green line on the bottom is the number of medical school graduates. And beginning in 2018, those are estimates because we don't have those numbers in quite yet for 18. And then they're projections from 2019 onward. So that bottom line represents the number of graduates. That red line represents the first year filled residency positions. And you can see we're at 1868 right now. And next year, we're anticipating that we will not meet that ratio, but we'll still be above the number of medical school graduates. But by 2020 and 2021, we will actually begin to exceed the number of medical school graduates than the number of first-year filled residency positions, unless we get some additional funding from the legislature to continue and maintain the GME expansion. So, the report has 4 recommendations. The first one is something that's in the agency's LAR. That's to add an additional $60.65 million for the 2021 biennium. This would actually allow an increase to maintain that 1.1 to 1 ratio to accommodate the opening of the 3 new medical schools. Not the approved ones, the opened ones. The second recommendation is to enhance, again, this is in the agency's LAR, which is to enhance the funding of the family practice residency program. This has been a program that's been in place since the late 70s, and actually funding goes directly to the residency program. It doesn't go to the medical school, and it actually suffered some significant cuts in the last several years. So the request in the LAR is to increase by $2 million to the program, which would increase the funding per resident to about $7,600. And the program supports roughly 750 to 780 family medicine residents annually. And the final 2 recommendations are to support the LAR's recommendation for increasing the GME formula to the level of 6554 for fiscal years 2021, and that is, again, one of the board's recommendations. And finally, I'll point out that the final recommendation is to maintain funding for the coordinating board's program called the Statewide Preceptorship Program, and this is an effort to actually encourage medical students to shadow a local doctor in primary care, usually between their first and second year of their education. And again, this is to promote primary care. The idea being that if you are exposed to primary care early, you might be more likely to select that as a specialty. That concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or discussions? Yes, Michelle?
Hi, Dr. Silverman. Could you provide more context as to why those 2 residency programs closed?
Yes, it was both financial reasons. The hospital just couldn't connect the dots anymore financially, so they felt like they severed ties in Wichita Falls with the hospital and the residency program. It was purely financial.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation? Moved by Mr. Raven. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Steen. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. And on to item 10K is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the advanced placement report per House Bill 1992, 84th Texas Legislature, regular session. Members, you have a copy of this report in your materials. Dr. Peebles.
Thank you. So I'll just try to hit the highlights of the report in terms of findings and recommendations. So this is the second report that we've submitted about the AP program. In 2015, in the 84th legislative session, House Bill 1992 actually instructed institutions of higher education to accept a score of 3 to accept at least a score of 3 to get grant credit for AP courses, unless they could prove up and a solid academic reason for not accepting a score of 3. So formally, a lot of institutions would either have AP scores run from 1 to 5, and a lot of institutions would have requirements that a student must have a score of 4 or 5 in order to get credit. The statute says that institutions must accept a 3 unless they have a sound academic reason for doing otherwise. And I'll talk about the effects of that in just a moment. But we're also required in this report to look at the academic performance, retention rates, and graduation rates of students. And what we found is that the academic performance of students in terms of things like GPA, time to degree, and so forth, is similar to students without AP courses. So in other words, students who bring AP credit into an institution perform at roughly the same levels that students who do not bring AP credit to an institution do. And retention rates as well were similar both from semester to semester, but also from year to year. The difference lies in graduation rates. And so for all AP exams, with the exception of biology, graduation rates for students that presented credit for AP graduated at a higher rate than students who did not present credit for AP. So in that sense, then, AP is effective as a program, and the number of institutions that accept a 3 or more, that has gone up to 45 two-year institutions now do that, and 22 four-year institutions as well. So there are 3 recommendations that come out of this report that are primarily directed at institutions, really, and one is to continue to make sure that AP credit is matched to courses. And so students sometimes go to an institution with AP credit, so they have the credit for the exam, but they are unsure what course it should be matched to. And so institutions need to continue to help students to understand exactly what course at that institution is going to match with their AP credit itself. And then also to sort of double efforts, if you will, to make sure that AP courses for which students are given credit, that they also are matched to major requirements as much as possible, not just transferring it in as elective credit, but also making sure that where it's appropriate and applicable, that students also receive major credit as well. And then lastly, to try to do more to encourage students to actually present AP for credit. Now, there's a lot of reasons why a student may not present to an institution their AP score to obtain credit, but roughly 40% of all of the scores of 3 or higher that students achieve in Texas on AP exams are never presented to institutions to receive credit for that. So one of the things in terms of reaching the goals of 60 by 30 and reducing debt and time to do, increasing completion rates and reducing time to degree and excess hours would be to try to encourage students as much as possible where they have achieved a score of 3 or higher on an AP exam to present that to institutions and receive full credit for it. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Dr. Peebles? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation? Motion by Mr. Plank, seconded by Mr. Raven. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 10L, is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the Texas General Academic Institutions Increasing Successful Community College Transfer Report. This is per General Appropriations Act, Senate Bill 1, Article 3, Section 49, 85th Texas Legislature. Members, you have a copy of this report in your materials. Dr. Peebles.
Thank you. So this is an annual report. This will be the 9th annual report that we've done on transfer. This is built off of information submitted to us by four-year institutions where they talk about and describe what they believe their best practices are, what their transfer processes are. And that information is included as an appendix to this report. We don't print it out as a general rule because it's about 300 pages long. So it has a lot of information in it from the institutions themselves, and we combine that information with some analysis of things like graduation rates to try to look at the efficacy of transfer. So out of this, we have identified three what we think of are areas for our best practice, and one is advising, and that is to really strengthen advising where that is at all possible. But part of the idea behind that and what makes advising well is when you advise on site. So one of the best practices we identified is that where an institution goes to a high school or goes to, in this case, goes to a community college, and the four-year institution sends an advisor to the community college to make contact with students and advise them on site, it is very, very helpful to the student in transfer. So that's one thing that came out of this as a best practice. And the other is to have mandatory orientation sessions for transfer students. So institutions have long had mandatory orientation sessions for their new students. And those tend to be students who come in as freshmen. And transfer students who may come in as a sophomore or a junior don't normally, or have not historically at least, gone through orientation sessions. But more and more, it seems to be a best practice to have a mandatory orientation session that is geared especially for and directly at transfer students and helping them make that transition to a four-year institution. Some of the problems identified by institutions, and these again are problems identified by four-year institutions in relation to transfer students they get from two-year colleges, is that students tend to come with excess hours. And as you know, we have a lot of initiatives underway to try to help with that issue and reduce the number of excess hours that students bring with them. And also inadequate advising at the community college level. Advising suffers all over the place, and part of that is driven by the low number of advisors per the number of students that are there. It's also driven by the complexity of having 150 majors in this state and 37 institutions and asking an advisor to have all of the information about all of those that they can try to give to a student. So those are things that need to be worked on. And another one that's identified is the financial aid for transfer students. So a lot of transfer students start at a community college oftentimes because of cost. It's much cheaper to go to a community college than it is to go right away to a four-year institution. So in an effort to save some money, they go to a community college. So when they transfer to a four-year institution, the monetary reasons that they had and the financial challenges they had for not going in their first place, they just got postponed for a couple of years. And so they're there when they transfer as a sophomore or a junior. Mm-hmm. And so financial aid specifically directed at transfer students is also a problem as well. And then four-year institutions also identified that better use of both core curriculum as a transfer mechanism, but also fields of study and the work that we're doing with it that might also help transfer students transfer and exceed and have their credits actually applied to their degrees. So transfer students typically take longer to graduate overall. Once they transfer, they tend to graduate in roughly the same time that four-year students do. So in other words, it takes students longer to get to be a junior, but once they get to be a junior, then they graduate in roughly the same amount of time that all juniors graduate in. And what that tells you is that all of the problems associated with transfer from a two-year or four-year institution didn't show up in those number of hours and that time to degree. And so how to address that, and one of the recommendations that comes out of this is to continue to strengthen advising through both face-to-face but also through electronic means where possible, and also to place as much emphasis as possible on using the core curriculum as not only a transfer device but also making it applicable to degrees, and then to continue with the field of study work that has begun and make sure that those things are both used by the community colleges in terms of the courses that they offer, but then to ensure that they're accepted by four-year institutions as well.
Okay.
And I'll be
Dr.
happy to
Peebles,
answer any questions.
thank you. Yes, and before we open up to questions, if we have any questions, Commissioner's report came up with his transfer issue. And last legislative session, I thought that Dr. Peebles did a great job taking a lot of tough questions from the Senate Higher Education Committee. I was there, and I'm glad you were the one that was testifying for us. But as the Commissioner says, this item and the recommendations on our next item are tremendously important for preparing for the legislative session on the transfer issue, because that's something that's going to be really high on our agenda and topic for this next session, as we always get questioned on that. And so I'm glad, kudos to you and your staff for continue to work on this, because we know we're going to have to be prepared for that question again.
Absolutely.
Okay, so members, any questions on this item, the staff recommendation? Hearing none, do I have a motion for adoption? Moved by Mr. Ravens, second by Mr. Wilson. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, agenda item 10M is a consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to best practices in the transfer of course credit between public institutions of higher education report. This is per Senate Bill 802, 85th Texas Legislature, regular session. Members, you have a copy of the report in your materials. Dr. Peebles.
Thank you. So this report is one most recently mandated by the legislature to look at best practices and transfer. And in this report, we took a little bit different tact on the methodology than we did for the previous report. And in this one, what we did was we looked at institutions who, and the number of transfer students that they have. And what we did was we tracked their transfer students through the receiving institution to see how many of them graduated, how long did it take for them to graduate, how many hours did they have when they graduated, and then tried to identify the 5 institutions that performed the best under those with that kind of criteria. And then we asked those 5 institutions, what do you do that makes your transfer success greater than other institutions? And there are really 3 things that came out of that. And again, as you might well imagine, the number 1 was the importance of advising, and how important it is to try to get to students as early as possible and to give them information. Along with that is also timely information. And this is timely information in 2 senses. And one is that the information that advisors give to students, or the information that's available to students on websites, or how they get this. And a recent study, for example, shows that students primarily rely on websites to give them information about college. But that information itself needs to be timely, which means that catalogs need to be up to date, advising guides need to be up to date, and so forth. And that it sounds easy, but that's also sometimes a difficult task to monitor all of that. But it's also timely in the sense of when do you get the information to the student. So if the student has already attended a year and a half of community college and now they're getting information about what their major is and what it might look like, they may have already taken a lot of hours they don't need. So part of this is also making an effort to get to students as soon as is possible and to advise them very early on when they become freshmen, while they're still in high school, and so forth. And then the last interesting piece of this is that we also took a look at dual credit, and it confirmed what we all know, or what we've all suspected, and that is that the more dual credit you take, the more excess hours you tend to have. Yeah. And at low levels of dual credit, up to about 0 to 15, then you tend to not have excess hours due to taking dual credit. But when you get to 60, then you tend to have a lot more. And that adds about 6 hours on average to the excess hours numbers through dual credit. So that also goes back to the issue of providing timely information and giving it to high school students as soon as they begin to take dual credit, they need to have some sense of what's going to not only transfer but also apply to a degree. And again, the recommendations in this are that that we pursue our work with making the core more transfer and applicability friendly, and pursue the work with fields of study. But there's one interesting recommendation we came up with on this one, and that is to look at Advise Texas and see if there's a way for a community college student, even though they're applying to a community college, to indicate what their preference might be to attend a four-year institution, and then have that four-year institution try to contact a student early on in their career to community college to better align the courses that they're taking.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Peebles. Any questions, discussion?
I got a quick one, if you
Yes.
don't mind, Dr. Peebles, kind of maybe unrelated to that. On the, no matter which application you're going through, transfer credits, et cetera, I actually took the time to go through the other day and look at the Applied Texas program for my son. As I was going through that process, that is an arduous process. That entire document is arduous. It is confusing. It is, it'll guide you on what you can or can't do in terms of the number of words you can put in. You think you modified it, and all of a sudden it accepts it and truncates your submission, and you can't go backwards once you've done it. It is.
Okay, who wrote it?
It was difficult. I mean, I'm just saying, at the end of the day, is there an element where we would consider getting advisors that would come along at the schools during the admission time? And,
I guess he did.
I mean, there's an element of that just tells me that people need help. This was I got to look at it. I thought, man, if this is hard for me to look through, it's got to be really hard for some folks to navigate. And so I just wondered if there's really a means by which families need help getting through that process. So.
And I don't disagree with you at all, and I will let the expert on Applied Texas answer the questions. Thank you, Doug.
No problem. The timing is great.
For the day, didn't you?
No, this is a point. One thing we talked about earlier with the chat bot is part of eventually to go to Advise, to be a part of Applied Texas, to help people go through that live, not later on, not waiting for an email. You can do that right then and there live. So that's one thing. But I think the bigger question is something we've raised recently, and Dr. Gardner has brought this back around, and Sapupsi, as far as revisiting the Applied Texas app and what we initially wanted it to be and what it's become, and that's happening right now. So your timing is great. It doesn't help you in your current process, but it'll help the future students behind that process to actually improve that, not only functionally in process, but also in the information we're sharing. So your time, you're accurate. We're hearing the same thing and trying to adjust.
Sorry to divert. I was just feeling the pain and thought I would share that with the group.
Maybe we can come up with a solution before you finish reading the document.
Lord knows, that may be true.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Wilson?
One thing you can clarify for me, you're saying that dual credit, kids with dual credit end up taking on average more hours?
On average, they graduate with roughly 6 more credit hours of hours that have not been applied to a degree than students who don't take dual credit. And keep in mind, this is 6 hours on top of the roughly 139 or so that on average students are graduating with.
Right.
So on average, students accumulate more hours than they need, and dual credit adds to that. And so it kind of goes back to, I think, one of the commissioner's remarks this morning, but it applies to transfer. The transfer problems that dual credit students have are the same problems that all students have, but dual credit tends to exacerbate that. And that's driven by a lot of things. Students in high school, a lot of times their GPA is weighted if they've taken AP or dual credit courses. So in that sense, it doesn't really matter what the course is. And so sometimes there's not a lot of thought given to how does that course then help me later on?
Right,
It's
because
helping me now.
it shows a college a certain level of rigor in the high school curriculum. By doing it.
Yes.
One thing that was confusing before, because I think somebody said that the kids with dual credit beginning to college end up graduating at the same time as kids in college without dual credit, so there was not a drag. But it seemed like if I had 12 hours of dual credit going in, I should graduate
earlier
before the others. And so is it taking longer for dual credit transferees? Are they
In that sense, yes, it does take longer.
So there's really no, I'm just saying, it doesn't seem like there's a net savings in time for the student or graduating early by doing that.
Yeah. On average, the students with dual credit actually graduate a little bit earlier, but it's not quite a semester's worth on average than regular college students do. And I think part of that's reflected in the fact that even though they have some time, or two things. One is that even though they have some time in college, in high school, by taking dual credit, that turns out not to apply to a greater extent. And so that gets reflected in that half a semester or so of time.
So is the system really better off with, I mean, that was with dual credit, I mean, I guess it gets you going, but it sounds like the net, I heard two conflicting things. To me, I heard there was no impact, or there was no negative in offering dual credit. They weren't worse off, but I'm not convinced they're better off.
Well, it helps them a little bit with time to degree. It helps them oftentimes a lot more with money. For example, it is cheaper to do this route, to have some dual credit as a general rule, particularly in those instances where the colleges are offering the dual credit at either completely waiving tuition fees or offering some reduced rate for it.
Right, and that's
so it can save them some money. And I think the other benefit of dual credit is that it has the impact oftentimes of encouraging students who would not have gone to college otherwise to go to college. So there are benefits of dual credit. It's just that time to degree is one of those where the benefits may be very small. Yeah, and to follow up to Mr. Wilson's question, Dr. Peoples, is I've talked to some students, they say, because they start so early, they take dual credit, but yet when they get to, let's say, a campus, they're not so sure what they want to major in or what they want to do. And so some of the dual credit may not apply. And so it doesn't necessarily cut it short. Right. Do you see that, Dr. Peoples? Yeah, and I think it goes back to this notion of the better advising and actually applying to that. And then I think another issue here is that while we make a lot of out of students who exit high school with 30 to 60 hours of dual credit, on average, students take less than 12 hours of dual credit.
If I could, this is a perfect moment to remind you that one of your legislative recommendations is that dual credit students have a degree plan in place by 30 hours, and the Community College Association recommends sooner. So by putting that in place, they're in a better position to take advantage, not have that same issue when they get to college, Dr. Frias, that you were talking about, and they're more likely to have thought about what am I actually going to major in and will it count?
I think that's going to be very helpful. Yep. Okay, if there's no other discussion or questions for Dr. Peoples on this topic, do I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation? Moved by Mr. Raven, second by Ms. Williams. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Agenda item 10N is a report to the board on school closures and/or teach-outs pursuant to Chapter 7, Subchapter A, Section 7.75. This is an information-only item. Dr. Peoples. So you can see in your board materials in the blue pages that two institutions have closed since we last met, Argosy University and Strayer University. Both of those are in teach-out, and so they both are doing what they need to be doing to close. Since this information went to print, we've also been apprised that the Education Corporation of America has filed for bankruptcy, and they are going to close. They also operate a number of institutions in Texas, and they have, I think it's 16 institutions in Texas. They plan to close 3 of those, and they have already apprised us of that and talked to us about their teach-out, which will last for more than a year. So they're taking the steps they need to accommodate and take care of those students, but they also have another 13 institutions scattered around Texas that will be up for sale. So we'll be watching that pretty closely to see what happens to those 13 institutions as we move forward. Okay, thank you. Next, agenda items 10O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. Yes, I do remember the alphabet. Items O through V are on the consent calendar. Agenda item 10W is a report on institutional requests acted on by the commissioner or assistant commissioner since the last board meeting. This is an information item only. Dr. Peebles.
So you have the specific programs and institutions listed in your white pages, but we've approved at the assistant commissioner level 43 new degree and certificate programs. We approved 35 requests to phase out programs. So if you want to look at it that way, a net gain of 8. We issued 1 certificate of authorization since then, and we received 8 planning notifications, which means that we will, in all likelihood, receive proposals for them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the business of the Committee on Academic and Workforce Successes.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 11, matters relating to the Agency Operations Committee chaired by John Steen. John?
So Mr. Anwar informed me that he's got a medical situation, and he, not him, but somebody in his family, so he needs to go on and leave.
We'll still be a quorum. We'll be okay.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Anwar.
Good luck with your article. Thank you. Sorry, guys. Okay. Yeah, because if I go very late.
Yeah,
the
no.
traffic will-
Take care.
Okay, it's getting late, and so I want to say I hope to move through my portion of the agenda pretty rapidly. And just to remind our audience that we had an AOC, the Agency Operations Committee, just yesterday, and the chair and the vice chair were there, and we covered these topics in a lot of depth. So somebody observing might think we're moving pretty fast, but we've already done a lot of this discussing in the committee meeting. So during the committee meeting yesterday, we approved the following items: a contract with iSphere for Phase 2 of the Web Focus Upgrade and Security Remediation Project, the certification of Texas Research Incentive Program funds for emerging research institutions, the issuance of State of Texas college student loan bonds, and a 2-year extension for the current student loan software contract. The committee also received a brief report on the following items which did not require any action: grants and contracts, including those exceeding $1 million, the fiscal year 2018, year-end 2018 financial report, an update on internal audit and compliance monitoring reports and activities, and the process of obtaining an external quality assurance review of the internal audit and compliance monitoring functions. The next item is 11B, public testimony on agenda items relating to the Agency Operations Committee. Ms. Battles, no one signed up to speak. So we'll go to the next item. The next item is item 11C, consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board relating to the certification of Texas Research Incentive Program, TRIP, funds to the emerging research universities. Members, this item would normally come under the oversight of the Committee on Accountability, Affordability, and Planning. However, due to timing issues, this information was not available in September when the committee met. Therefore, staff brought this item to the Agency Operations Committee yesterday for consideration before coming to the full board today. So Mr. David Young, Senior Director, Funding, is available to answer questions.
Would you like a brief presentation?
Members?
A quick briefing on this, if you don't mind, just very
Okay,
brief. But
certainly. I apologize, but the white page that provides the amounts for each institution wasn't included in your handout yesterday. We've included it in today's packet. It's the last document, and I know we're running late, so I will be very brief. The Texas Research Incentive Program was created by the legislature in 2009 to incentivize our emerging research universities to solicit private gifts for research. To be eligible, an institution must be designated as an emerging research university under the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's accountability system. Emerging research universities are expected to offer a comprehensive range of excellent undergraduate and graduate programs, award at least 30 PhD degrees annually based on a rolling average of 2 consecutive years of degree production, and generate at least 20% of the research university's criteria for restricted research expenditures. We have 8 eligible institutions. Since the program's inception, emerging research universities have received more than $661 million in gifts that have either been certified as eligible by the board or may be eligible pending certification. So far, the legislature has appropriated over $326.2 million for TRIP, which matches $417 million in gifts. As of October 9th, 2018, there were 422 gifts that hadn't been matched by the state. The cost to fund these gifts would be $178.4 million. Here's the breakout. Gifts previously certified by the board, $92.8 million. Gifts that have been peer-reviewed and await board approval, $51.1 million. Gifts that have been received but are pending peer review, $34.5 million. It's important to note that the unfunded match will continue to grow this fiscal year as we receive new requests. State match is set in statute. Gifts from $100,000 to $999,999 are matched at 50%. Gifts from $1 million to $1,999,999 are matched at 75%. And gifts from $2 million to $10 million are matched at 100%. Matching gifts are awarded in order of the date of deposit until funds are depleted. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
So just to emphasize that our role in this is one of certification.
Correct.
So are there any questions or comments?
The legislature hadn't matched it yet because it's waiting for appropriation, or?
Right. Last session, the legislature cut funding for TRIP, so that increased the backlog. And then, of course, we continue to receive new match requests, so it just, the deficit continues to grow.
Got it.
When you mentioned that there were 8 eligible institutions, does that mean there's only 8 in total in the state that meet this program?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the certification of Texas Research Incentive Program TRIP funds to the emerging research universities. So moved. So I've got a motion by Mr. Raven, second by Dr. Farias. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Young. The next item is 11D, consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board regarding a resolution authorizing the issuance of State of Texas college student loan bonds in one or more series to refund the 2007A and 2008A bond series, and delegation of the authority for administration and approval of the activities necessary to complete the sale of the private activity bonds. Mr. Ken Martin, Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services, CFO, is available for questions. And is our lawyer here? All right. Also present to answer questions, Mr. Richard Donahue from McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I have the dubious task of being the last 2 items on your agenda. So I will go through this.
I think you can do a pretty good summary because it's good news, right? We're saving some money.
Yeah, it really is a question. You know, how many people want to save $35 million for the loan program? And we're done. Real quick, if you know, I always use this analogy. If you think about it, it's like refinancing your house. We issue bonds. You all approved bonds in July resolution, which will put the bonds to sale in February to fund loans for the next academic year. Well, bonds that we have outstanding that are we've issued years ago, in this particular case 2007 and 2008, are what we call callable. So we put a 10-year provision. We issue bonds over a 20-year period, but we put a 10-year provision that the bonds are callable, meaning we can pay them off. So investors who purchase the 4-year bond, a 5-year bond, 6-year bond, all the way through 10 are fine. Investors after that are always at risk, depending if prevailing interest rates are lower than the stated rate on that security, and in this particular case it is. And so what we're proposing is to issue new bonds called refunding bonds. We'll issue bonds 2018 series to generate funding, and then we'll put that funding in escrow. We'll also contribute $10 million with loan program funding, excess funding, and that money in escrow will then in December be used to pay off these two older series. The net present value of the differential in the cash stream, so it's $35 million of straight cash, is about, but the net present value is about $15.5 million when you discount that time period going back. We're shortening the period of the new bonds versus the old bonds, as well as we're receiving a lower market rate. We're hoping, as we still have, there's always market interest risk, but it would take a substantial increase in market rates for this deal to not be profitable. And so this is to approve a resolution for us to give us approval, just very similar to new money. I'll let Mr. Donahue here talk briefly about the resolution itself and some of the intricacies, but it's essentially saying that gives us authorization to issue new bonds.
I think we'll spare ourselves the intricacies of the resolution.
Brief summary.
At a very high level, the resolution is the official action of the board authorizing the issuance of the refunding bonds. The refunding bonds would be issued to refund the 2007A and 2008A bonds that are currently callable. We would delegate to either the commissioner or your CFO the ability to actually price the final terms of the bond. The resolution requires that the refunding bonds generate a net present value savings, that the par amount of the refunding bonds cannot exceed the original par amount of the original bonds, and it's a delegated pricing. We would be looking to do a competitive pricing as you've priced all your prior bonds. We have submitted an application to the Bond Review Board so that we can go forward and get their approval, and we're looking at an exempt issuer approval to occur in early November, with the idea that these bonds will be priced right before Thanksgiving if possible, so we can get the interest rates locked in at that point.
Assuming approval of this, are you going to need some signatures today?
I do have a stack of signatures.
Who needs to sign?
For the chair, the secretary, the commissioner, Mr. Martin, and Ms. Battles.
Good. Any other comments?
Yeah, so you're going to go ahead and price them now, right? I thought I heard February. I was going to ask if there's a way to price them and sell them early.
Yeah, the schedule would call for us to price the bonds in November after we receive approval of the Bond Review Board, which is the next step in the process after you all, assuming you all decide to move forward today.
Yeah, and in this, as I mentioned with the AOC, we did not need to seek part of the state volume cap for tax-exempt bonds. Normally for new money we do, and we did for the with the July resolution for new money for our 2019 series. Since we're paying off bonds that were already approved tax-exempt, we're basically just using that same authority. But we still do need Bond Review Board approval. So all our bond issues have to go before the Bond Review Board. So we get our board approval, we submit an application, notice of intent to the Bond Review Board, and get their approval. And I believe it's around November 6th that I think we hope to hear if we're on the exempt issuer track, which we hope for. And then we'll immediately work for a timeline to price. And as Mr. Donahue mentioned before, Thanksgiving is a target. That'll be for the pricing. That'll lock that in. Approximately 2 weeks later, we have to get AG approval. They'll review the terms, conditions, et cetera, get their approval, and then we'll be able to close on the bonds, put that funding in escrow, contribute our $10 million to it, and then our escrow agent will pay off the other bonds subsequently.
Thank you. And this is separate from the new money bond issue that was approved in July. That's the one that we're targeting for February currently.
Right.
Yeah. I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance of State of Texas college student loan bonds. It's moved by Mr. Plank, seconded by Mr. Wilson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Donahue.
Thank you.
The last item under agency operations is consideration of adopting the committee's recommendation to the board to approve a 2-year extension for the current student loan software contract. Mr. Martin.
Yes, thank you, members. This item, we currently, as you know, have the student loan program, and we service about $1.5 billion worth of student loans outstanding. With that, requires software to do so. In 2015, we signed an agreement with Nelnet LLC. It was an 8-year agreement for the current software that we're utilizing. We had 4-year terms, one 4-year initial term, and then two 2-year option terms. What I'm requesting to is invoke the first 2-year option. So this will take us to 6 years. We'll plan to then invoke the next 2-year option from there, of which we would then issue an RFP prior to the 8-year term and either seek a new vendor or existing vendor. So this is just approval to continue the terms. And as a reminder, the agreement that we went into in 2015 or in now was saving us approximately over $500,000 annually versus the prior agreement. So substantial savings to the program, and this software was an enhancement to the previous software.
So any questions or comments? Then I need a motion to approve a 2-year extension for the current student loan software contract. Moved by Ms. Williams, seconded by Mr. Raven. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. This concludes the agency operations agenda, and I make a motion we adjourn.
All in favor? I think motion passes.
That's the quickest motion I've ever seen adopted.